We're reopening the hearing for the appeal of Fisher and Hickland. Today's date is October 16th, 2025, and we are going to open the record now. For the new faces, we are joined again by our hearing reporter, Ms. Alonzo. Ms. Alonzo is preparing the transcript for this hearing, which will be available on our Office of Tax Appeals website. Please open the record now. To pick up where we left off, I believe this morning we're going to start with Ms. Hickland's testimony. Is that correct? That's correct. Thank you. Ms. Hickland, if you could just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you. You may lower your hand. All right. You may begin with your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge Long. Ms. Hickland, could you state your full name for the record and spell it, please?
Catherine, Catherine, Hickland, Hickland.
And Catherine, can you just briefly describe for us your work history? We know, obviously, we can see beautiful soap opera star. Can you just sort of walk through very briefly your work past?
Yes, I was an actress for 39 years. I started in the 70s, and I spent 39 years on television and a Broadway stage. I did Les Mis on Broadway and other things. But I spent the bulk of my time of those 39 years on television in soap operas and leading roles. I did soaps for 39 years, and everything else I did in addition to that.
And what other items would you say you've done in addition to that?
Well, if you're talking about present day, I'm a hypnotist, and I'm a mentalist. That's what I do now. So I spent my whole life on stage and on television. And then when I thought about retiring, I knew I couldn't. I'm not the type of personality to do nothing. I don't do nothing well. That's what I say. And so I had always wanted to find a way to help people. So originally I went back to school while I was on One Life to Live, which is where I was for the last 12 years of my career. And I got my certification to become a hypnotherapist. And one of my professors at that time said, why don't you take this to the stage? Because you spent your whole life in front of cameras and on a stage, and and I thought, oh my gosh, that seemed a little daunting. I had terrible stage fright. I didn't know that until I started doing live theater, and so I really was flipped out about thinking about getting on a stage by myself. No script. So I started to do stand-up on weekends just to get used to being alone on a stage. And then I ended up doing a show called Pieces off Broadway, which is a monologue show, and that's where I really had to work out my stage fright and things like that. And then I started to work on my show with, I moved to Las Vegas because I could, for the first time, live anywhere I want, and that's where I wanted to be.
Do you also do any writing, Catherine?
Yes, I've written 2 books. I have the first one, The 30-Day Heartbreak Cure, and the second one is Cat and Fern's Excellent God Adventure. That's a daily inspiration for 365 days a year of heaven on earth.
And do you describe yourself as an inspirational writer?
Absolutely.
Can you also, another thing I want to get into, just again very briefly, is your personal history
Mm-hmm.
and your marriages.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here we go. I'm having a Vietnam flashback already. Okay, go ahead.
Can you just explain who you've been married to previously, sort of what the genesis was, the relationship, and then the reason for the end?
Right. Well, I think I was married to David Hasselhoff for a couple of years. everybody knows now that he has a terrible drinking problem. That was a big secret then. And I just couldn't do it. And then, so I left that marriage and moved to Italy for a couple of years because it was pretty rough when you're in a public marriage, and it goes. I mean, here marriage is private, but the public knows about it, and we were kind of like the super couple of the '80s back then, and then you leave and it just gets rough, so I was a broken winged bird on the side of the road. I moved to Italy to make a movie and stayed for 2 years and came back and felt like pretty empowered. You have to learn another language. You have to learn other people's ways. You have to learn to stand up for yourself. There's no such thing as a line in Italy. You have to fight your way to the... So I grew up there pretty much. And then when I came home to the United States, I went right back to what I know, which is acting. And I'm also a speaker and an author. And, I have a lot of sides.
Would you say your prior marriages impacted your feelings about relationships moving forward and what you were looking for? Yes,
especially though I didn't, in as much as my first marriage ended due to the fact that I was it was the three of us, it was me, him, and the bottle, right, basically. And so I couldn't do that. I thought I'd go down. So I got married again some years later to a wonderful person. I still think he's a wonderful person. His name is Michael Knight, and he was on All My Children. I was on One Life to Live. And he was sober when I married him, and at some point fell off the wagon. I can't blame them. It's me that, as you say, pulls the trigger. I agree to be in a relationship. So I started to think to myself, because he and I parted amicably, very much so, I started to look at myself and my part. And because it's a pattern, if something happens once, it's just happening. And if it happens twice, it's started to become a pattern. You're just doing it, and then it becomes a pattern. And I thought, okay, I've married two people that have alcohol issues, and so I'm the common denominator. I need to look at my choices. After 17 years of marriage to Michael, I decided to take 1.5 years off of dating completely because I was changing my entire world. I gave up acting. I was starting a new career. I was going to move to a new place. I'd never been able to move anywhere I wanted to. I always had to be where the work was. And so for the first time in my life, I got to choose where I wanted to live and where I wanted to be.
So let's talk about that for just a second. Can you explain to the panel sort of the genesis of your move to Las Vegas and how that came about?
Yes. New York, when I lived there, was an incredible place. It was in the heyday of its time. I mean, it was fantastic. But it moves really fast and it hums really loud under your feet. So I remember thinking, I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't want to live here anymore. I'm getting older, and this is too much energy under my feet. I want to go somewhere where I want to be, build a home. Because I'd been, going around and, since my childhood, I was always here. And as a profession, I knew that I was going to be traveling a lot if I was going to pursue becoming what I wanted to be, which was at that time the best known stage hypnotist in the world, a female, not male, because there are so few of us. And so I knew I needed to be somewhere where it would be easy for me to get in and out of, because I fly all the time. And in New York, I was always missing planes because of snow and this and this and this, and it cost more to get to the airport than the actual flight. So all this went into my thinking about where I wanted to be. Easy access to an airport, lots of nonstop flights. But more than anything, I wanted to become part of a community where it is the entertainment capital of the world. And so I needed to be there. I did not want to live anywhere else. I'd never even considered anywhere else. And so that's where I decided to put down my roots.
And can you explain how that came to be vis-a-vis your first meeting with Henry?
Right. Well, Henry was my pastor in the 80s at the church that Todd and he started called The Hiding Place. So when I went, I was on a book signing tour, and it was like 30 cities. At the end of it, the last city was Las Vegas. Henry lived in Las Vegas. He found me on Facebook and said, "Oh my gosh, I see you're coming to Las Vegas. I would love to see you." I hadn't seen him in many, many years, decades, actually. And so I did try to call him when I was in Las Vegas for a personal appearance some couple of years, like 8 years before that. And I called the hotel, and he wasn't there. He was out of town. He answered the phone. I didn't know him, of course, and I was very nervous because I used to see him at church, and I had a little crush on him, I'm not going to lie. And you know, but it was 40-something years prior. I was married at the time. He was married at the time. It wasn't like something where I was like, I have such a crush on him, I'm going to meet him now. You know, no, it was just all wrong, right? So when Henry came to see me at the Barnes & Noble where I was signing books, he wanted me to know if after the signing I could come back to his house, meet his wife, blah, blah, blah. I said yes. And so I went to his house after that. And when I walked in the house, you have to understand, I lived in New York City for years and years and years, where you live in an apartment, and they cost as much as the houses that we're looking out here. And I'd never seen such a grand house. So when I walked in, I said, "Oh, I love this house." He said, "Oh," and I'm thinking to myself, how do you get one of these, right? Because I didn't know yet where I was going to live. I knew where I wanted to live. So he said, "Well, there's lots of them for sale right here in this," and it was a guard-gated community, and I was a single girl and planned to stay that way, actually. Because this is before he came back into my life. And so there I was on the phone the next day with a real estate agent saying, "Show me houses." I am not terribly impulsive, so that was unusual for me. But I was just so curious about what I could get and for how much. And when I went to see this house that I bought, it was overwhelming to know that I could actually buy that house outright. I mean, in my mind, that was incredible to me, that I would be able to sell an apartment and buy this beautiful home, right? And that's what I did. It was a short sale, so I had to wait, but you know, I put the money down, and I wanted that house.
So you bought the house. Can we now jump to when you met Todd? When you spoke to Todd for the first time? Do you recall those circumstances and your reconnection through Henry? Right.
Well, Henry is very technical. He's technically savvy, and my new show that I was going to do with the hypnosis show, it was called "It's All in Your Mind." And you know, I utilized video and pictures and things like that. And so Henry, I told him what I was doing, and he said, I'll work on that with you. I can do that. And I was so happy because, you know, here I was in a new place where I didn't know anybody really that did that sort of thing. So it was almost like God just dropped that into my lap. Somebody I know, somebody I trust. It was a really great thing. So then that's what we did. We started working on the show together. Sometimes we didn't start till 11 o'clock at night. Because we both had a lot of commitments during the day. And then one night around midnight, when we were working in his studio, the phone rang and he answered it. And he answered a few questions or talked for a few minutes. And apparently one of the questions Todd had asked, because it was he on the phone, and he said, "What are you doing?" And Henry said, "Oh, I'm working with Catherine Hickland. Do you remember her from the Hiding Place days?" And he was, "Not sort of. I mean, I know the name, but not really." And so that kind of, he got off the phone with him, and I said, "Was that Todd Fisher?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, I had the worst crush on him in the 80s. Or the best. with the best of the worst. And anyway, I hadn't dated in a year and a half. That was absolutely, up to this point. And so to meet somebody that was interesting to me would be a little bit scary, because I decided for those a year and a half of no dating, because I needed to figure out what I was doing, my pattern, because, that seemed to be my sticking point, is that I have a pattern. What is it? So I can move forward if I ever meet anybody again, which I didn't really care if I did or not, that I would be more emotionally intelligent to make good decisions.
And Catherine, just put a timestamp on that. When was that first phone call, roughly, if you recall? When you were preparing for your hypnosis show with Henry?
2009, I would think. Early 2009, maybe. No, mid 2009. Because then Henry and I went to New York City and did my show. We put my show up. And so it was kind of mid to later, I think, yeah.
And then do you recall the first time you met Todd in person?
Yes. So Todd started to write me on Facebook. He started to write. I remember he looked me up on Facebook because Henry had said my name. And my bio was, mostly about who I am, but I talked a lot about my Christian faith because that's important to me. And he, I think, saw that and was like, oh, so it was, he started to make comments on my Facebook page. Oh, I had dogs. And so, he was saying, oh, I know what it's like trying to travel and you have dogs and you get somebody to look after them and that sort of thing. And I thought, he's flirting with me. That's what I thought, because he's starting to, make these comments on random things. Then he writes me on the back end. Then we start talking. We talk and we talk. And then he said, let's graduate to a phone call. We did that. I hate talking on the phone. Oh, I really do. I can't stand talking on the phone. So I was like, oh, no, phone call. So he said, let's talk on the phone. So we started talking on the phone for hours at a time, which for me was unusual. Then he said, I want to meet you. And I asked him to make a full disclosure. And I would make one too, and all the things you think that I'm going to really like about you. And I want you to write down all the things that you think I'm not going to like, and I'll do the same thing. And, at 52 or whatever how old I was, you don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste it. At 20, you have time to waste. At 30, you're starting to think real seriously about life. At 40, you start thinking, I better figure myself out. And at 50, you have no time to waste if you have reached any kind of emotional intelligence. So you kind of just put it out there. I didn't want to waste time. If this isn't going to be anything, because I hadn't dated in a year and a half, and I was happy with that. But he wore me down, and he did. He wore me down. Because I said, I don't know if I'm ready to meet you. And I had my foot in a boot because I had sprained my foot, and I didn't want to meet anybody unless I could wear a nice outfit. It was just being a girl, right? So he said he was coming to Vegas to see Henry and that I could come over there and say hello or not. So he pushed my hand on that one. And of course I went over there to say hi. And, that moment was like, and still is, boom. All the things I had written about, in my books, especially the 30-Day Heartbreak Cure, because I consider myself a relationship expert, because that's what I do mostly when I do any kind of hypnosis therapy. It's with people who are going through a rough breakup. Anyway, he gave me his full disclosure. I gave him mine. He sang a song in my ear. And that was it. All the things I had said beware of to girls, like love bombing, moving too fast. We moved at warp speed, and it was shocking for me. But I felt okay with it because I could talk to Henry, who knew him better than anybody. And he could talk to Henry that knew me very well. So it wasn't like a blind thing. I just really trusted that my decision making at that moment was going to be all right.
Can you talk about the decision making vis-a-vis the decision to remain in Las Vegas and not go back to California?
Well, I did. One of the things I had realized about myself in this journey to know myself and what my patterns are about relationships and how I got them. Could you just ask me that again so I give you the answer that I want to give you?
Can you just sort of explain and describe the decision-making that went into the decision to stay in Vegas as opposed
Yes,
to
so one
somewhere
of the
else?
things that showed up in my pattern in relationships was that I would twist myself into knots for a man. Meaning, like if someone said, "Oh, when he lived in California," I immediately said, this is a problem, because one of the things I don't want to do ever again is twist myself into knots to accommodate somebody else's plans, dreams. I had my own. I had been, married for 17 years. Dating was like a scary monster under the bed when you're 5. And I just took that out of the equation for myself by going on the sabbatical. When I met him, right away, I knew that this full disclosure thing I was asking for and that I was giving would be complete and total transparency, because of having no time to waste, and it didn't matter to me one way or the other. Like I was good by myself. But I also if someone said, "What do you think of love at first sight?" I would have said, "You have to be really careful with that." I loved my second husband very much, but I've never known what this kind of peace feels like, when within a loving relationship. Everything always seemed a little bit chaotic.
And at the beginning, you made it clear to Todd you were going to stay in Vegas.
Absolutely,
That
because
was the-
I said I tell you, this is it's not that far away. It's a 6 or 7 hour drive. It's a 45-minute flight, but I don't have time to be. This is where I want to be. I bought the house of my dreams. I'm building a life here, and I'm not a girl that can be somewhere where there's not people. I know myself well enough. And I would have before said, okay, you know what I mean? Like I just would. But I really knew that if I gave up one more thing of myself for somebody else, that would be the end of me. I really did. And so I absolutely made that clear, that I am a Las Vegas girl.
And can you then discuss the transition as Todd is moving in with you and what happens with your housing situation in Las Vegas during those first year and a half?
Well, when he this is going to sound really bad, but here we go. And we're streaming. OMG, here we go. So he moved into my house. Right, like he didn't. For 12 days after I met him, he came home with me and did not leave. Well, his motorhome was there, and we got written up for that, of course. And and his mother couldn't get a hold of him because we were just very busy falling in love. And so when he left, I mean, I wept. This is not me. I'm not like that. And I knew that I was either in really big trouble or in one of the most beautiful things that could ever happen to a girl's life. And so, but I did not cave in any way. I did not want to be in the Central Coast of California on a ranch with no people around me. I'd lose it. I'm not that girl. I love people.
So at some point in time, it became clear that your home that you loved was not going to work for the two of you.
Okay, so he, like he had stated before, we got written up by the HOA. I adopted 2 dogs in the middle of the night because they were going to be put down. Somebody called me and said, "Can you step in and go get them?" And I did, and I didn't know they were 2 pit bulls. So anyway, I brought them home to keep them from being euthanized. So those were kind of my guys, and when he came in there, he said, "I don't know, what would you think if you sell this house and we buy a house together?" And I thought, oh my gosh, I've only just bought this house a year ago, or a year before, and the economy was terrible, so I was worried about all that, but I did consider it, and then we decided absolutely, because my house was a compound too, but if I sold that and then we bought something else that works for us, I can have animals. My dogs would have a yard, because this was a big deal. I suddenly had dogs, and I wanted to make sure that they had what they needed. So I put the house up for sale, and we got a great buyer, but they wanted the house in 30 days. 30-day escrow. I'm talking about a 6,000 square foot house full of furniture. And so I had to put everything in storage. I said, okay, I'll do it, because they met the price. And I thought, okay, this is great. And since the economy was the way it was, I didn't think it was going to be hard to find another house. I really didn't. And it wasn't if you were looking for small houses, but we were looking for something big. So everything I owned was in storage, and I was thinking, okay, we have to start looking for houses, and we did. We put offers on a couple of houses. They fell through. It wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. But I rented a house because I needed somewhere to be in 30 days. So I had to rent a house because I hadn't found one yet. And that was my home. And so, I would just take a few things out of storage because it was a small house. Not small, but by any 3,000 square feet. But it was not going to house all my furniture. And I had hopes that I was going to be able to find another house together.
And what was the reason for the rental instead of just moving? You had a house available to you in California that could have stored all of your
I could have
property.
saved a lot of money because I had 3 storage units for all my furniture. Because that is my home, and that is where I didn't even consider living anywhere else. I mean, that was my
ranch.
No, it's a really nice place to visit. It was a beautiful place, but not for my life and what I was doing. I could not imagine being in the middle of nowhere without people. And I thought, if I go out there, I'm not going to accomplish my dreams of what I want to do, because it's just, you got to be where the action is when you have a goal.
So let's talk about that for a second, because one of the things the Franchise Tax Board has pointed to fairly regularly throughout their briefing are your blog posts. Mm-hmm. And you sometimes reference the ranch or the compound, which I just want to also make clear here. When you're referring to those, you could be referring to either Montana or Creston. Is that correct? Mm-hmm.
Well, I could refer to at my Airbnb. I do over 100 shows a year on the road, and have for many years. I perform well over 100 shows. I'm on the road a lot. When I'm on the road, I've had this nomadish lifestyle for 15 years. It was not hard for me because I didn't grow up in a Leave It to Beaver house with all the parents underneath the roof. I don't get attached to things. I get attached to people. And so for me, I just wanted to, for the first time, settle down where I wanted to be and not where I was dictated to be by my career. And I really wanted to be there. Though if you said why, I don't know. It was, I work a lot, especially as a mentalist, with my intuition. And, it was just, this is where you're supposed to be. This is where you're supposed to be. This is what kept coming through me.
And can we, again, with regard to these blog posts,
Yeah.
you describe yourself as an inspirational writer.
Yes.
You've said to me previously, miserableness does not inspire.
Well,
So
here's the thing, it's true.
Can you just sort of discuss that context in sort of with respect to these blog posts?
Right. So when I would go to visit the ranch, at first it was like, oh, I woke up by a cow mooing. It was, really great. But life on the farm is not laid back as John Denver would try to have you believe at all. I felt to be stressful. And I just didn't feel good there. I just can't explain the absolute bottomless pit of feeling that I had, when I was there.
Can we discuss one relatively painful part of this, which is Todd's stepchildren?
Yeah.
How would you describe your relationship with them?
Well, their mother had passed away, and I was very cognizant of that and very compassionate towards that. But they were kind of just too wild for me. I felt like they were too old to still be living at home, and they weren't contributing anything. And I thought, this is really bad for everybody. I'm not going to stay in a place where somebody's grown children are, and they're wild. They didn't have any boundaries. It seemed like to me, certainly not with me, no respect. And I've never been anywhere where I wasn't respected, so I felt it very strongly. And I remember thinking, okay, so this is yet another reason I couldn't do this. There's just a lot of things that are showing me. And so then I said, I'm sorry, but this isn't my dream. Those are the words I used. This isn't my dream. And I didn't realize just how seriously he would take that, because he turns out that he is very much supportive of not only my dream, but other people's dreams. And he did not fight me on it. Nothing. He said, I get it.
What did you understand to be the plans for the ranch once you and Todd got together, got married?
Well, I think, he was more than ready also to leave, because you have a whole life there with somebody. And he, Todd is the kind of guy who I wish for every woman to meet, because he, if you have something you want to do, he'll move heaven and earth to make that happen for you and with you. And I had never known anybody like that before. So I realized that what a great person with a huge heart that he is. And I felt a little bad about being adamant about not wanting to live where he had considered home, but we hadn't discussed that a whole lot. But when I said, this isn't my dream and I just can't do it, and he said, that's okay, because his time there had also come up, and I didn't realize that, but he didn't really have a reason to be there anymore, because that was his wife's dream. And again, this is the way Todd is, so that wasn't his dream.
So let me point to, I want to raise a couple of specific points.
Ms. Trenchik, just before you go on, I want to make sure we're staying on track with respect to time, so I just want to let you know we've been going for about a half hour, and I want to make sure that you leave time for your other witnesses as well.
Okay.
How much time, Judge Long, does that give us in total remaining?
So we set aside 4 hours for direct testimony. Mr. Fisher went for an hour yesterday. You're a half hour in this morning, so that leaves you with 2.5 hours.
We're in great shape. Thank you. Todd, I'm going to ask for your assistance with something here. I'd like
A slide. Trying to wake up the monitor here. I think it's all in the sleep. You guys have a remote on things?
Do they have a what?
A TV remote. Excuse me. There she goes. That should do it. There you go. There we go.
Okay, now, Catherine, one of the issues that the FTB has brought up is your love of animals.
Yes.
And that's where those animals resided.
Yes.
So we've got a brief presentation that we're going to walk through here to explain where these animals were over the years, because one of the issues in your blog post is they're from years after our year's an issue here. So let's focus in on sort of where these animals were as we run through this. And if you could just tell us on these slides, sort of first, what is this first picture?
That is our home where we currently live.
And that is the home that was purchased in 2011 and closed on in 2012?
Yes.
Okay. Todd, could you go to the next slide? And who and where is this?
That is Nugget, my rooster. and that's his wife, Football, next to him with his hen.
Now, one of the allegations that the FTB raises is that Nugget, that somehow connects you to California, is that Nugget was actually delivered to you in California.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
I was performing at a state fair in Texas. There was a magician there who was performing as well. He had this rooster in his act. The rooster was stuffed into a box that had no bottom, and then he would make the rooster appear. And I was mortified. So I said, I have to have that rooster. And he said, well, it's my rooster. I said, no, I know. And I said, can I just hold him? And he put him in my arms, and the rooster kissed me. And, and he said, oh my God, I've never seen my bird do that. I said, by the time this is over, I'm going to make you an offer to buy that rooster. And I'm not going to be doing any negotiating. It's just the price I give you. And he said, you better make it a good one. I have a 10-year-old at home. Blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So I made him an offer 2 weeks later when we were done, and he accepted it. But I couldn't take the rooster with me because poultry can't fly, even under the plane. So he lived in Virginia. The rooster went home with him in Virginia, and then I had to have all kinds of jump through a million hoops to get this rooster to me. I was visiting the ranch, and the rooster was delivered to me at the ranch. He was driven across the country by like a pet courier.
And was that courier also developing other pets in the area?
Well, that's why I had the rooster dropped off to me there, because he was delivering about 6 or 8 animals, and so it was going to be a lot less for me to have him do it there than it was anywhere else.
Okay, where was this picture taken?
That is in Las Vegas.
And do you know approximately what year?
Gosh, I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so just let me think about this.
It's okay, Kat, if you don't remember.
Yeah, 2012, I think. Yeah, because I'm looking at, because Football has died, and so I'm just kind of like deducing, but it looks like 2012.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Todd. And this guy.
I have a lot, so let me just... That's my second Nugget. I have 2 roosters, white roosters, Nugget and Nugget 2.0.
On this picture.
Oh, that picture. Okay. That looks like Chicken Hawk, I think, because I have 3 that look exactly alike, but I'm pretty sure that's who that is, and that is in Las Vegas because I'm looking at the furniture.
Okay, Todd, could you go to the next one, please?
That's my boy. That's Nugget.
Also in Vegas?
Also in Vegas. Just passed away 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Had a good life. Yeah, that is in Vegas because of my chicken coops, and I can see the theater behind it.
The point here, and the point to these pictures, and Todd,
Yeah.
you can run through a couple, is that you did maintain many, many of these animals in Las Vegas.
That's the goose I found. I found that goose in a hayfield in Creston, and it had been left behind. I didn't know. I thought it was a duck, because I'm like Green Acres. I don't know everything there is to know about farm animals. I do now. Anyway, he went home with me to Vegas, and his name was Buddy Boo, and it turned out the bigger he got, the more I could realize and see, he's by the swimming pool in Vegas there, that he was a Canadian goose. He had a broken wing, so I knew that he would be my goose for his life. He learned how to swim there. He learned how to be there. It's not easy to raise a goose in a house, but I love him, and so you just do whatever it is, you know. But I took him home. That's Teddy, and that's in Las Vegas. Teddy used to watch TV with me in the bed, so yeah.
This one, Todd.
Who else would have me but Todd Fisher? I didn't know anything about chickens before I met Todd, so it was a really wonderful thing to. That is Chicky, and that's in Montana. And Archie, our African gray, is underneath him in the cage there. That's Nugget at the front door in Las Vegas. And that's Nugget and Deb and Dwight, and is that football? Oh my gosh, yeah, so that would have been 2012. That's my Emu and Me. It's in Las Vegas.
Cool.
And I would say that that's around the same time frame, 2012.
Again, emphasizing the point here that these are, I will call them exotic pets that were with you in Las Vegas, that were not at the ranch in Creston as inferred by the
Correct.
APB.
They're all rescues, so people would bring them to me, and I'd say, okay, they can stay. I mean, it's expensive, but I love animals, and those are my babies.
And then, Catherine, again, just to close this out, let me just also focus on this. This is actually a video that we're not going to play, and it said we're not going to play. But this
Okay.
is a picture of you and your mother-in-law in Las Vegas with
Yeah.
Buddy Boo, correct?
Yes.
And do you remember the circumstances of this video?
Yep, we were there, and I hadn't found a name for Buddy Boo yet, and Debbie loved being part of my social media because we did fun things, and it was new to her, and we were very close. And she said, why don't we have a contest with your people on social media to name the goose? And that's what we did.
Yeah. And just to then sort of close out this issue with Debbie here, other allegations have been made by the Franchise Tax Board that during the years in issue, being, remember, 2011 and 2012, Debbie was living with Carrie in Los Angeles. What would your response be to that?
Debbie, like me, is very much a nomad as well. She worked. That's one of the reasons I think we got so close, is that we both have big lives on the road, and it's, as a woman, that's tough, you know, and so you don't meet that many other female entertainers. So we really bonded over that very quickly. She wanted to be with us, but she didn't want to feel like she was underfoot. So she had, so we offered to build her a separate quarter, you know, on there. And it's in the background. You can see it in the background. That's her quarters that we built for her, even though I didn't mind her being in the house at all, but she was like really adamant about not being underfoot. So we built that for her, and that's where she loved being. So between the road and being with us, I'd say that no, she was not in California all the time. But here's the other thing: she just it wasn't until later, you know, that she and Carrie were getting to be more close again.
And you've seen Bright Lights. The representations made in Bright Lights about Debbie spending more time there and being just up the hill from Carrie, those were true statements, but they're true statements in 2014 and 15.
Correct. Yeah. The daunting hill. Yes. It was very much later on.
I have no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you
Catherine.
so much.
Thank you. I'm going to give Franchise Tax Board a chance, but I do want to ask a couple of questions first regarding just the blog posts specifically.
Okay.
I understand from the briefing that the contention is that the blog posts and as well as Ms. Reynolds' book are either overstatements or celebrity gossip, and I also understand that the representations here today are that you wanted to live in Las Vegas and always did. But I do want to make clear with respect to, because on Exhibit L, page 80, you do very specifically, and I'm going to quote you here, because Todd lives in California and we are married, I am not in Las Vegas as much as I'd like to be. Are we intended to accept that as hyperbolic with respect to your inspirational writing, or?
Well, first of all, I was on the road for several months a year. Every year I am. And so I am not, that's time I'm not in California. That's time I'm not in Las Vegas. I'm on the road. I take what I call poetic license in my writing because I am an inspirational writer. It's not going to inspire anybody if I say that I don't like where I am. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not inspiring. So I consider home to be so many places because when I'm on the road and I'm going home to a hotel, I say to Todd, let me call you when I get home. That's just for me. I never really felt like I had a home until I moved to Las Vegas because I was going somewhere I didn't really necessarily want to live but had to go because that's where the work was. When I started writing books and things like that, I didn't feel I was being disingenuous by saying, I'm home. Home for me is an Airbnb. It's an RV. It's a tour bus. It's a hotel. For me, that word is not what most people, I think, would consider home to be, but I don't have a conventional life. And I'm also a relationship writer, so I felt that at that time I was writing that was the right thing to say, rather than get into the minutia of how much or how little time we spend somewhere. I didn't mean anything by it, is what I'm saying. It's just poetic license to make the story flow.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I understood.
Okay.
Okay, well then, Franchise Tax Board, if you have any questions for Ms. Hickland?
We do not have any questions.
Okay, thank you. I just want to ask, do my co-panelists have any questions? Judge Gast?
I do not have any questions.
Thank you.
Hearing Officer Parker?
I have no questions either.
Okay, thank you. Then we are ready to move on to your next witness. Who will that be?
Yeah, of course.
We're going to call David DeSalvo.
All right, Mr. DeSalvo, if you could come forward.
Oh, don't worry about it. We've all sort of given up.
And while we're getting set up, because the three new witnesses weren't here at the beginning of the hearing, I just want to remind everybody that this hearing is being live streamed, and so anything that is said or shown in the hearing room can be seen online. Mr. DeSalvo, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may begin.
Good morning.
You found us.
Can you please spell your first and last name for the record?
David, D-A-V-I-D, DeSalvo, D-E, space S-A-L-V-O.
And David, can you just tell us what your current profession is?
I'm a CPA, business manager, tax preparer.
And can you just provide us with a little bit of your educational background?
I went to Lehigh University. I got a BS in business management.
Anything further?
No.
Okay.
I'm a CPA.
Okay, and can you briefly just describe your work history over the last 40 years or so?
Out of college, I went to Press Waterhouse, which I don't even know what their name is now. in New York. I got a CPA in New York. I transferred to San Francisco, got a CPA in California, and eventually ended up here working for a large business management firm, and then went out on my own with my partner.
Do you recall when you went out on your own?
1989. And Debbie was one of the reasons, because I had Carrie Fisher as a client, and she recommended me to Debbie, because Debbie was going out on the road for the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Do you recall when your relationship with Carrie started? Was she the first Fisher that you worked with?
No. At the large business management firm, Kaufman Eisenberg, she was one of the clients.
Okay. And do you recall approximately when that was, when Carrie recommended you to Debbie?
1989.
What was that year? Okay. And can you identify when you first started working with Todd?
Well, I started working for Debbie. I inherited Todd.
And was that same 1989 time frame?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And so you did work for Debbie Reynolds, for Carrie Fisher, and for Todd Fisher, is that correct?
Not for Carrie after that.
Not after that, okay. Was there a time when your offices were actually in DR Studios?
Yeah, we started out that way. It just turned out that way. We were looking for a place to have our studio, our offices, and the studio had open space, which Todd didn't like that I moved into, and so, yeah, it was convenient.
Now, as you're well aware, as Todd's CPA, one of the primary issues here is the memorabilia and the taxation of this memorabilia to Todd as an individual. Through your years with the family, what's your understanding of where that memorabilia was stored, both the museum and the personal?
Well, my bookkeeping office, we had a couple spaces, was actually next to where a large storage closet was. And it was large, but it wasn't that large. And so over the years, that's where a lot of stuff was. We also had some furniture that we actually used. But, Debbie also had some of the really high value items that she kept with herself. And where, I don't know.
Do you recall specifically the bankruptcy of the hotel occurred in the mid-1990s?
Right.
At that point in time, an inventory started being maintained of the memorabilia. Do you recall seeing that inventory or seeing the computer systems on which that was maintained?
During that time, no.
Okay.
Because the hotel had opened, and a lot of the stuff was moved around a lot, and so where anything was, I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to switch over a little bit to some of the personal stuff. When Christy passed away, what did you understand Todd's intentions with respect to the ranch to be?
Not much. He just appeared on me.
And sitting here today, do you know why?
No. I assume in retrospect it was probably because of Christie's passing away. But I always had a hard time finding him. Barbara Strong was his bookkeeper, secretary, everything to him in Creston. And so she was the one I dealt with. And a lot of time he wasn't around when I talked to her.
This residency issue has come up previously for Todd before, hasn't it? In terms of California asserting he was a resident when maybe he wasn't?
When was that? I don't know.
In the 1990s.
In the 1990s. In the hotel days?
Let me rephrase, David. It may help refresh your recollection.
It never
also
got
your
very far.
Involvement. Did there come a time where Todd transitioned his residency to Las Vegas?
Yeah. Well, when Debbie opened the hotel, he was very, very much involved.
And do you specifically recall reviewing the facts and circumstances surround his move and
course.
Agreeing that he was a non-resident of California?
Of course. Every tax year, we'd have a discussion about what he was doing, where he was staying, because I knew he was moving back and forth. I knew and I was at the hotel a lot, and he was there, and so we discussed it, and I don't remember the years, but we moved him to his residency to Nevada, and then later on, when everything blew up and shut down, we moved him back to California.
And just to emphasize that point, you reached, based on facts and circumstances, the decision that he was in fact a Nevada resident, and then that he had to return to California based on his facts and circumstances.
Right.
Is that correct? So for the years in issue, which are now, just a reminder, 2010 to 2012, and David, I have to say, I appreciate your being here today. I know it is October 16 after one of the most difficult tax seasons for LA County in history with the fires, so thank you for taking the time to be here. You prepared Todd's 540 NRs for 2010, 2011, and 2012, correct?
Right.
And you performed your due diligence in preparing those returns in terms of determining Todd's residency status, correct?
Right. Well, I started to have to contact him in Las Vegas. He moved there.
So based on those facts and circumstances as you knew them, did you believe that Todd satisfied the requirements to be a non-resident of California for 2010, 2011, and 2012?
Yes.
There was some discussion yesterday regarding the head of household status that was claimed on Todd's tax returns. That would have been your decision to file as head of household, right? Todd wouldn't have known to tell you to do that.
Well, it's one of those things where I asked him if he had, going to declare any dependents. He did, and we went over the rules for head of household. Want to get the best deal we can,
Right.
Right.
So you filed him as a head of household, understanding that his dependents lived on the ranch in Creston while Todd lived
I didn't actually
in
know where they
Vegas.
lived.
I need, please wait until she finishes.
Okay.
We didn't tell him that.
So you filed his HOH status, understanding that he was residing in Las Vegas,
Right.
correct? Okay. Okay, at this point, I'm going to reserve additional time with Mr. DeSalvo until after the Franchise Tax Board has performed their examination. Thank you, David.
Okay.
Franchise Tax Board, do you have any questions for Mr. DeSalvo?
Yes, Judge Long. Is it fine if I sit here, or would you prefer if I go to the panel?
No, however you're comfortable.
Okay, excuse me, at the podium. Okay. Mr. DeSalvo, my name is Ellen Swain. I'm an attorney at the Franchise Tax Board, and I really appreciate you
I
being
can't see
here.
you.
Oh. I can move to the podium. I'll move to the podium.
Yeah, probably.
That's better, huh? So I wanted to also express my appreciation for you being here. Yesterday was probably your hardest day.
There's
apart
always
from
people.
April.
There's always something.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming here. And as I mentioned, my name is Ellen Swain. I'm from the Franchise Tax Board, and I'm just going to ask you some questions about the reporting positions and about how the capital gain was reflected on the 2011 and 2012 tax years. Before I get there, as you had just testified, that you were close with the family, the Fisher family, and Debbie Reynolds.
Close? I don't know about that. They had their own lives. I had mine.
But you shared business offices. Your office was at the studio.
Yeah, but nobody was there. I mean, it was a dance studio,
Right.
and so Debbie would be there a day, maybe every couple of months, and Todd never.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you so much. So my first question is, for the 2011 tax year, just from our starting point, you took the filing position that Mr. Fisher was a non-resident that year.
I took it in 2010.
Okay. But we're just here today about 2011.
And
Yeah.
so as far as I determined, he continued to be a Nevada resident.
Okay. And so that brought you into the California form, 540 non-resident form,
Right.
2011. And I have a copy if you'd like to see it as well. If that would be helpful to you.
Okay.
Okay. And so what I'm focusing on the 540 NR is line number 13, which is 2011.
Okay. Do you know which one this is, page number?
I can bring it over. May I approach?
I have a copy. I've got it.
That's the 1040.
Oh, but it's got to be a test, though, right? Okay, she's got it.
What line?
Line number 13.
Okay. Capital gain. All right. Yep.
And so, what's the amount of capital gain that was reported in column A, the federal amount?
$5,992,795.
And do you recall what that reflected?
That was the sale of at the auction, and that was his portion of it after deductions.
And do you recall what you had said was the amount that the significant piece that was included in this?
It was classified as rental property.
And were there any specific dresses? Any specific items that you were considering as
No.
rental property?
No. Todd prepared a schedule, a very detailed schedule of all the sales. Now, some of them had to be in 4797, and some had to be, I'm forgetting now, but we divided it up, and it flowed through the federal return, so.
And by taking this position, you said how much of it was California source gain?
None.
So that was 0. So that's why that column E13 is blanked out.
Well, D is, which column are you talking about?
You can talk about column D if you want to talk about that first. That's fine.
No, so E is 0, yeah.
So so what you believed is there was no California source income for the 2011
Because he was a
tax
Nevada
year.
resident, yeah.
Because he was a resident. But if he's a non-resident, you were saying there was no California source income for 2011.
Not capital gain, no.
Right, which would have been California source income if it had been located in California.
What had been located?
The
Todd was
property.
located in
No,
Nevada.
not Mr. Fisher. I'm not talking
Well,
about his residency.
It's his tax return.
Right, but if he's located in Nevada, then the question is how much of his income is California source income?
None. No capital gains in this case. It
So
was that one sale.
Just the one sale. So you took the position that none of the property was located in California in 20.
For the sale, it was.
For the sale, it was located.
Yeah, it was there, and it was in Beverly Hills.
It was in Beverly Hills, and it was in Creston before that.
I don't know.
And there was a warehouse in Creston.
There was a warehouse in Creston. Was there a warehouse in Creston at that time? Okay.
So property that would have been located in California would have a California source.
I don't think so. Not just because it was there at some time. I don't think so.
But it was there at the time of the auction.
Well, yeah, had to be.
Okay, thank you. And then in 2012, it was the same filing position. If you have the 2012 return, if not, I can provide you a copy.
Probably looks the same with different numbers. Huh?
She says that was.
It's side one of, okay. A little smaller.
So on the that's the 2012 Form CA, non-resident CA. Again, let's go back down to line number 13. How much capital gain was reflected on the federal return? And that's under column A.
582,180.
And then how much was sourced to California in column
None.
E? So again, in the filing position, the reporting position on this return is that there was no California source income.
For capital gain.
For capital gain, right. We'll go back to that in a moment. So there's no California source income for capital gain. So of the money that would have been earned from the 2011 December auction, because that's what brought us into 2012, there was no capital gain. I'm sorry to belabor this.
Yeah, both years, yeah, 2011 and 2012.
And the 2012 gain would have been from that December auction.
You know what? I don't remember. It's cash basis, so yeah, it's probably, I mean, I'm assuming it's money that flowed through after the 2011 calendar year.
Because you had written a letter to Mr. Fisher in 2014 that explained that process, that within 30 days payment would be coming from the auction house.
I don't remember that at all.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you your letter that you wrote?
Maybe.
Okay. May I approach?
Go ahead.
What exhibit is that, Ellen?
It was the response in the DeSalvo papers.
David Nancy.
It says at the bottom, it's got a date stamp on it.
Doesn't have an exhibit number on it, though.
Okay. Okay, I guess that sort of says the same thing that I just said right before that on a cash basis, some money flowed in afterward.
That the payments from the December auction would be received through the trust in the following year,
Right,
in 2012. Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much. And going back to you did mention that there was some California source income that was reported in 2012. And I can draw your attention to,
Let me look at the schedule here.
I can draw your attention to line 7. And in column A, it says wages,
You're right.
federal amount of $74,200. And of that, $15,400.
That's W-2 wages, so that would have been how they were paid to him.
So that's not gain from the sale.
No, that's W-2 wages.
Okay.
That I remember.
Okay. And then your position was that $15,400 was California source income. That's what that far column says.
That's the way that it was reported on the W-2 that he was issued.
Okay.
I vaguely remember that they had continued to pay him as a California person for his work in California. I guess it was for his work, but he would have. It had to be changed, and it was that year.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to move on to, we did have some questions yesterday about the Form 4797, which is on the federal return for the 2011 tax year.
I had some questions.
No, there were questions that came up when you
Okay.
were finishing your tax season, but when we were here. So I wanted to just transition into that topic. And I have a copy for you as well.
I think I have it. Is that
You have a copy?
48?
4797.
It'd be in here.
Ms. Swain, is this for 2011?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Judge. It's Exhibit O, page 11.
This is.
I have
Why
an
don't you
extra-
show it to me?
Well, this, he wants to make sure we're on the same page.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wish there was an easier way to manage papers at a podium, but I appreciate your patience. So when we look at that form, could you please explain what the form 4797 is used for?
It's a business property that's sold. The capital gain loss there.
And so on this, on page 11, the exhibit is Exhibit O, page 11. It was also your DeSalvo Exhibit number 1 that was provided in the responses to the declaration. It would say page 2 up in the upper right-hand corner of the return. Yeah. So I was just adding the reference for the record. Yeah. I was just doing that for record purposes. So the way the schedule is written is the museum equipment is listed as property A. And it says that it was owned for 11 years. That's what A says, the top line. Is that correct?
Yeah, but column C.
On the 4797, page 2.
You look at column B and D, B and C.
I'm looking at the very top where it says it says museum equipment, and then it has the capital gain, the years.
It's different than what we asked. This is,
Hi, sorry. We just want to make sure that the record stays clear, so if everyone can just stick to talking one at a time.
How would you describe the acquisition date of this property?
I'm looking at the screen here, which this must be your transcript, the one that you handed me.
I can hand you.
But anyway, so the acquisition date is June 30th, 00.
David, and let me clarify for the court reporter and for the panel. He's actually looking on the computer screen at Exhibit O, page 11. I don't know what Ellen actually handed to him.
it's not the same.
Yeah, this is your transcript, probably. FTV's transcript.
We have multiple copies because I know it showed up in a few
I
places.
understand the
Yeah,
dates, but it doesn't.
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that is on me, so I am sorry, Mr. DeSalvo.
Okay, so on column A, I mean, on line A, column B, I put June 30th, 00.
Okay, and then the
June 30th is my shorthand for various, but the computer software doesn't accept various.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're in a little bit of uncharted territory with respect to this exhibit. Can you please show me both of the things that you're looking at? Just someone safe, bring it up. I'll take a quick peek.
He wants to see the discrepancy.
Do you want this off the record or on the record?
Let's close the record for 2 minutes.
This is the exhibit labeled Exhibit O, page 11 of. This is their version of that, apparently.
It's the same form that
It's consistent, but you can see the entries are different. So this is probably from
Oh,
their internal.
okay.
it's literally the same.
no, that's my software.
But just
Well, if he
different
because
font.
he didn't prepare this, he didn't understand what it was, because this isn't how his system would have done it.
Okay.
Which would be easiest for him to have? Because I can use.
I think using what's in the record.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's reopen the record. To be clear, the numbers on the computer image and the paper image that were handed to Mr. DeSalvo are the same. They appear to be a different font, so we're going to work from the exhibit in the record, which is the one that is on the screen. Ms. Swain has the same copy as well as what appears to be on the screen, as do I. And may continue.
Thank you, Judge. So the museum equipment, you're saying, was acquired at a various date because you weren't certain of the date. That's your...
I was, because Todd had given me the schedules.
Right.
But I put those in to be approximate, but to also be, just to show us long-term happening.
Right. So it's approximate, like you said.
There it is.
And then it was, the most important thing really is, and we can certainly move on, is the fact that it was sold in 2011 on June 11th.
I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah. And that museum equipment is then what shows up in property A on the left-hand column.
Yeah, property A is line A above it,
And that would have been $119,750, which was then, the basis was deducted of $73,000, which brought it down to gain of $46,337. Do you recall what that property was?
That was actually display equipment.
Mr. Salvo, I'm going to have to ask you to speak into the microphone.
Oh, okay. I was never on. That was actually display equipment, cases and stands and risers and things like that.
And where were those used?
Well, Todd had them. They were used in the hotel, and then probably for this auction, but I don't know exactly when.
And they're not reflected as California source income as
No.
being located in California at the time of sale.
For the auction, they were.
Okay. But they're not reported on the return.
No.
But they were in California for the sale.
Right.
Because they were used
some
in the
of them,
sale.
Well, actually, they're the ones that sold, so, all of them.
Thank you. And then moving to the next column, column B property is $4,184,800.
Right.
And the amount of gain once the basis was taken out is $3,776,000.
Yeah. Yes.
And $76,348. And that was for the ascot dress.
Say that again?
That was for the ascot dress.
No, that was for collectibles that were sold at the auction. Now, maybe the ascot dress was in there, but I don't remember.
And you're calling this museum rental property.
Right.
And could you describe what that would mean?
Well, Todd was renting these items out.
He was renting $3.7 million.
From time to time. They were available for rental.
Okay. And so they were property of the museum.
The museum, no. The whole point is that this was Todd's property.
But don't you call it up above museum rental property?
Right. It's for museum use, or it's just a general description of what it was. Sometimes museums like the Academy Museum will actually rent items that they don't own if they want them for a special purpose. And so this is what, these collectibles would be rented by, who knows, restaurants or casinos or whatever. And so that was the business that Todd was trying to do, but he then went ahead and sold them.
And that is line 19B.
Say that again?
That is line 19B.
I don't don't see a 19.
Back up to the, up at the top.
Oh, yeah, 19A, okay. 19B is the acquisition date.
Yep. So 19B says it's museum rental property, and that's saying that all the property B was museum rental property.
Okay. Well, there's column B and line B, so you're talking about 19A, column B. All right, I mean, line B. The 19A, line B is museum rental property. That's what, yeah, that was the description I put on there.
Correct. And then, so you, in the response to your declaration, when we had finally had follow-up questions, you wrote that the primary asset owned by Todd for this auction was item 506, Audrey Hepburn's ascot dress from My Fair Lady, which sold for $3.7 million and was included in Todd's income on Schedule D, Form 4797, line 19B.
I don't recall any of that. I mean, I barely recall the ascot dress. It was just Todd had put together a spreadsheet of all the items and what the basis and acquisition date, and I don't know if the acquisition date was on there, and the sale price. So if the ascot dress is on that list, I guess, I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay. And that was from from Exhibit O, page 7.
Exhibit O.
Where would that be?
Is that one of these?
Oh, get it, yeah, here.
This is Exhibit O.
That's page 7.
All right. First I'm seeing this. What I got under there?
That's your file.
And I don't recognize this page.
This was your response.
My response?
Mr. DeSalvo, if you go to the next page, you, at the very least, your what appears to be your signature is on there, just so you're aware.
I don't remember this at all. What date? When was this done?
Thank you.
Okay, so it started there.
Yeah, but what's the document?
Well, she wrote you and then you responded.
Oh, so these are my responses to Todd's attorney's questions. All right, so we're back to Exhibit O, page 7. All right, so what's your question?
What I said was correct, that your position in that letter was that 19B on Form 4797, Schedule D, reflected primarily Lot 506, the ascot dress, which was sold for $3.7 million.
Okay. Oh, it's the bottom of the page. Please note that the primary. Well, that's what this says, yes. All right. Looks like I signed it, so. I don't remember specifically about the ascot dress or any, that it was sold for that amount or anything. All right.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to take a break in just a few minutes, but I want to make sure that my co-panelists, if they have any questions for Mr. DeSalvo. Hearing Officer Parker, do you have any questions?
I do have a few questions.
Okay.
Yesterday, when you weren't present, Mr. Fisher did credit you with being the one to identify that in the late 90s, when he returned to California, that it was important to change his residency back to California. And he started filing his California resident return at that time.
Right, because he had moved. You know, the hotel was toast. It was, you know, non-operational. Yeah.
Yes. And then again, today we were, when you were discussing the change of residency again in 2010, you testified that you looked at the facts and the circumstances to determine that it was important to change his residency again. What specific facts and circumstances did you take into consideration in helping determine that he would now file a non-resident return?
Well, my statement, I believe, was that every year I go, you know, especially for someone like Todd, you know, our office and the work I've been doing for the last 40 years has been entertainment, and so I've always dealt with people that move back to New York, you know, California, like that. So every year I would, for someone I knew was moving around, I would review with them what they did and where they were living, and you know whether where their residency should be. Then, so I'm sure I did, because otherwise I wouldn't have, you know, I wouldn't have changed it without the review. And it was just a verbal thing, you know.
Thank you. So you were relying on the conversation you had with Mr. Fisher?
Well, and the fact that he had moved, yeah, I knew that.
Okay, and along the same lines, when you filled out the number of days that appellant spent in California, was that also based on a conversation you would have had with the appellant?
It would have been, if I don't remember filling that form out specifically, no.
Okay, I
So
understand.
if I filled the form out, it would have been.
Yeah, I don't know what I filed on my tax return last year, so I understand we don't expect you to remember everything. But in general, it would be based on a conversation you had with the appellant?
Yes.
Do you have forms that you have your clients fill out every year, a questionnaire, like to update any of their statuses for the year?
No.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Judge Guest, do you have any questions?
This is Judge Guest. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have one question, and I'm looking at, for your reference, Exhibit E, page 79, which is the CA 540 NR for the 2012 tax year.
Oh.
I think we have 79.
Exhibit E, you said? What exhibit again?
Exhibit E, page 79.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And I just want to clarify, so on that year, you did identify both Mr. Fisher and Ms. Hickland as domiciled in California, with a residency in Nevada for Mr. Fisher for 2012. Do you have is there an explanation for labeling the domicile as in California during that year?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Do you have an explanation for labeling their domicile as California for the 2012 tax year? You can see that on line 1 of the 1A of the 540 NR.
Oh, yeah, this came up before. Yeah, that was an error.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. We have 2 more witnesses to go, and so I think now is an appropriate time to take a break. We can resume at 11:10. So please close the record for the next 15 minutes. Ms. Alonso, are you ready?
Yes, Judge.
Are my co-panelists ready? Okay. Ms. Duranjek, who is the next witness?
Thank you, Judge Long. Henry Catrona.
Thank you. My apologies. I just want to clarify. Did you want to do redirect for Mr. DeSalvo?
No, thank you, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Catrona, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Catrona.
Morning.
Could you please just spell your name for the record?
Henry Catrona, Henry Cutrona.
And let me just thank you for driving out from Las Vegas this morning to be here. We really do appreciate
With
it.
all the traffic, thank you very much.
Among other things. Can you just briefly describe your educational background?
Sure. I went to Orange Coast College, and I majored in music and psychology. Prior to that, I went to Glendale College. And then later on, past Orange Coast, I went to Fuller Theological Seminary.
And Mr. Catrona, did you ever serve in the military?
Yes, I served in the Navy, 1968 during the Vietnam War. And I was a dental technician, taking care of the pilots' teeth. So that was my service.
And once you left the Navy, what did you do?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Once you left the Navy, what did you do?
I went back to California where I lived, and I actually moved down to Orange Coast. That's when I went to Orange Coast College, and started a band. And this was all during the Jesus movement, and I became right in the middle of the whole entire thing. My band became part of the whole thing. It was that band at the time was called Gentle Faith, and then from there we played with other bands like Love Song, and a couple of guys out of Love Song and myself. We started another band called Noah, and we traveled all around Europe. In fact, we played at the 1972 Olympics, where the Israeli athletes were hostages, and ended up in Israel, living in Israel for a year. And then I came back after that, back to California, put another band together, another revision of Gentle Faith. This was all during the same period, and well, actually it took about 2.5 years to do all that. And am I answering the question?
You are. Let me jump ahead a little bit. Did there become a time where you became ordained as a minister?
What's that?
Did there become a time when you became ordained as
Yes.
a minister?
Yes. That happened after I came back and I was with another band. There was a very important thing I should probably say before that, which was I was playing with Debbie Boone, and we had played Vegas and the East Coast, Jersey and stuff like that, and ended up in Lake Tahoe. And when I was in Lake Tahoe, Debbie had brought her entourage with her, her friends and stuff like that, and one of them happened to be Todd. And I met Todd backstage that day. We were playing with Paul Williams at the time. On the way back on the airplane, getting on the airplane, Todd's sitting there by himself. I had already seen him backstage. I sat down next to him, reintroduced myself to him. Now, this is in 1975, I think. And he looks at me, and we started talking. He goes, you know, there's going to be a time when we're not going to be using tapes anymore. Because at the time, there were 8 tracks and cassette tapes. And I said, what are you even talking about? He goes, no more tapes anymore. It's just going to be on a magnetic device. This was way before these things were invented. And I went, I'm going to work with this guy. And I was really thrilled. And we never stopped working together from that all the way till right now.
So let me just confirm. Did there come a time where you become ordained as a minister?
I'm sorry,
Kind of
yes.
jump back to that story.
Yes, I'm sorry. And then right after that happened, we worked together actually on, he had a recording truck called Smoke, and we did a lot of recording, but basically he was doing a lot of production. He was like producing different shows and stuff like that. And I got involved with a church in Glendale, and through that church in Glendale, I was ordained.
So, as has been apparent already from your first story, that you and Todd are incredibly close, and that has come out in testimony over the last day and a half. Do you have any reason to lie for Todd sitting here today?
Do I have any what?
Any reason to lie for Todd sitting here today?
Lie for Todd?
Lie for Todd.
There's nothing to lie about.
Once you and Todd met, and I know this is going to be difficult to separate out the work and the personal because you guys have had a very long-term relationship, but can you sort of discuss some of the first work things that you did together?
Sure. I think he had a house on Cedarbrook in Beverly Hills, and I remember the very first time I went over there, he had carved out a little area underneath the house and made that his recording studio, and I met a couple of the people he was working with, and I believe the first thing we ever did together was in the recording truck up in Oxnard, and I believe it was with Terry Reed. And that was the first thing we had ever done together, and from then we kept moving on to other little projects.
Was that your first experience working with sound engineering?
No.
Okay.
No, I had done that because I was majoring in music at Orange Coast College, and so I had a little recording studio, and I was recording by myself. But I was enhanced by the whole thing because he brought it up on a more of a professional level.
But you were an expert in your own right in sound engineering.
Well, I wouldn't say that. That's a strong
Don't be
word in this
bashful.
business. Yeah.
Can you talk about? And I'm going to try and put some time frames on this just so we can make sure testimony keeps moving. 1994. Do you recall what happened specifically in that year around the Northridge earthquake?
1994 was the big earthquake in Reseda, and that was the year that Todd called me, and he said, "What are you doing now?" Now, I was pastoring a church called The Hiding Place since 1980, both of us, because what had happened, can I back up a little bit?
Of course.
Okay. So 1980 comes along, we started a church. It was basically a Bible study with 20 people, but it grew and grew and grew, and Todd showed up at the house. It was somebody's house, and people couldn't even get into the front door anymore, and he said, "This is ridiculous. My mom's got a studio. Let's go over to the studio." So we did, and the studio, if you don't know what it looked like, but it had like many rooms, maybe 10 rooms, and they were different sizes for dancers and people to rehearse. And we started out on a fairly small one, but it kept growing, and more people, and finally we ended up in the biggest studio that was in there. And we couldn't fit any more people in it. We ended up at the Wilshire Theater. But let me say one other thing, too. In the meantime, he started this show called Nightlight. And Nightlight was a very big productional thing, and we gathered a lot of people. By that time, there was maybe 600 or 700 people now at the church, and we gathered a lot of people and did a lot of production with that. In the meantime, Todd had been ordained, and we basically combined our talents together and made this church go in the right direction. Neither of us liked the religion side of the church. We were very against these big mega churches that were forming, and people didn't know what they were doing, and all they cared about were buildings and money and money and money and money. And we didn't really care about the money. We wanted people to authentically follow Jesus. Our faith was very strong in that area, and the musicianship, because of the awareness of our personal musicianship, we wouldn't let people get up in front of the church that just could learn how to play guitar last week and get up and play. There's a scripture in the Bible that talked about King David only bringing these excellent musicians in front of everybody to worship God. So we had the likes of one of the guys in the Eagles, Bernie Ledden. We had one of the guys in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He was in the thing. One of the guys in Ambrosia, the drummer in Ambrosia. And we had, and I'm not throwing names around, I just wanted to show you that this church was more focused on being authentic and following the scriptures as it was to like let's get everybody's money here and grab all this money and do that with it. So that's what we did, and Todd was an incredibly important part of the whole entire thing. So.
Excuse me. If we could just, I want to make sure we're staying focused. If we could just connect this somehow to the material, what's in question here with respect to the residents.
So I was getting off track.
The materials.
Can we get back to my question on 1994 and what happened in that year?
So 94, yes. He called me up and said, what are you doing now? And I said nothing because I was taking a sabbatical from the church. And he said, well, my mom just bought a hotel in Las Vegas. Come and help me. Would you come and help me run the hotel? And I went, I have no idea how to run a casino in Las Vegas. He said, yeah, you're right, but you do know how to deal with people and handle people. And there's going to be a lot of people here. So I went to Las Vegas, and he made me the general manager. And basically the general manager was the guy that went around to each one of the departments and made sure everything was running correctly. And so I was doing that for a while. And then the whole concept of a museum was being built inside this casino. And I didn't know anything about editing at the time, but I did know a lot about technical stuff. So he asked me if I could do that, if I wanted to do that, and I said, sure. So there was an editing room, and I sat in the editing room every day. And basically, for your understanding, what it was I had to go inside of movies, like let's say Singing in the Rain. I'd have to go inside of Singing in the Rain, and I'd have to look at our costumes that we had over here. There was a couple of costumes from Debbie in that, and I had to put the clip of her dancing in that costume with our costume and put them together, because the museum that we were building had revolving stages on it. So it was very well put together. And you would see it, the curtains would open up and you would see costumes, but on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, you'd see more costumes, and then there'd be a screen on top. So you'd look at the screen, and then you'd look at the costumes, and you'd go, oh, those are the costumes that they were playing. So that was my main job at the casino.
So obviously we are aware there came a time where that hotel casino had to file for bankruptcy. What happened, if you know, to the memorabilia at that point?
After it went in several different places, as far as I know. I wasn't privy to the whole thing, but some of the high-end pieces were at Debbie's condo. Some of them were in Creston. Some of them were at DR Studios, which is Debbie Reynolds' studio. And I'm pretty much, that's where all the three places. I think Carrie took some things, but I didn't understand. I didn't know what she took. But that was about it.
But at that point, you were aware that there was a specific attempt to separate out the memorabilia.
Well, yeah, that's what they had, yeah.
Now, this museum has closed. What happens next in terms of trying to find a new museum, trying to find a new home?
Right. I think the first place that came up that was big was Hollywood and Highland. And without boring everybody, Debbie pitched the whole idea. They loved it. Everybody wanted it, thought for sure this is going to happen. It belonged here, and it fell through. Then the second one that came up that was big was Pigeon Forge, where Todd had spent many conversations and then went out there, I believe, with Kat for a while, and he had designed this beautiful thing, and that one didn't work either.
Now, during this time frame, were you still involved with helping them to catalog and do these video clips that you were speaking of and any of that kind of work?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you something very specific. You were just discussing Todd and Kat's trip to Tennessee, and very, probably on multiple occasions. Did there come a time where you specifically were holding assets of Todd's while they were traveling?
Yeah, the ascot dress, because I was watching their house on Greystone, was kind of a wide open, very unsecure place. So the ascot dress came to our house, which was around the corner from their house, and we just watched it for a while, and then it left.
And in terms of some of the other high-end family pieces, and I can talk specifically about the subway dress because it's become representative for the family, do you know where that dress was maintained and why?
Yeah, it was maintained at Debbie's condo, and why it was there, probably because Debbie, at that time, was on the road 48 weeks out of the year, and then she was doing movies and TV appearances. It's a lot of stuff. I mean, she was always in demand. And I believe she left it there because that was probably the most secure place you could leave something like that. And I think there were some other Maryland dresses besides the subway dress there.
And why do you say it was the most secure place?
Probably the main reason is I went there one time, and it was like Fort Knox. You can't even get into the place. You drive in, and they question you immediately when you bring your car in. And that was that was the easy part. Then you walked into the lobby. There was a security guard on each side where the elevators went up, and you had to go to the front desk and talk to them about who you were. Why were you here? You had to give the name of the person you were going to go see. You had to get by the security guards to get to the elevators to go up. So it was pretty buttoned down, and I think if I had the opportunity, that's where I would stick my stuff too, because you're not going to get through with these people, you know.
Now let me bring us up to the year prior and the year of the auction. Did you have any involvement with Todd in preparing the memorabilia for auction?
To the point of still separating clips, taking pictures, because he had put together a beautiful brochure about the whole thing. So I was still doing basically the same thing, only instead of doing it for a museum, now I'm doing it for the auction.
And were you aware of the family memorabilia being brought into California specifically for that auction?
Not really. I wasn't really privy to the whole thing. No.
Okay. Did you spend time in Creston at all working on the preparation for the auction, or did you do the video sort of editing elsewhere?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Creston in different parts of the years. There was like years that I was up there, and when that happened, yes, I went up there and worked on the auction.
Okay. I'm going to circle to the personal side now and talk about, first, were you familiar with Todd's first wife, Christy?
Yes, very much.
And why was that?
Well, she came to the church, and I first met Christy at the church.
And then was there a specific reason why you continued a relationship with Christy, aside from Todd?
No, she was just one of the people that came to the church.
Okay, let me take a step back then. Did there come a time where you became a sober advisor for many, many different people?
Supervisor?
Sober advisor, AA.
Oh.
A mentor.
I guess that's the way they looked at it, sure. Because when you're a pastor, you're constantly counseling people and helping them as much as you possibly can.
And did there come a time where you were counseling Christy with some of her alcohol issues?
A little bit, yes.
And were you aware, you were obviously then aware that alcohol was an issue for Christy?
Yes, but I didn't know to the degree of how deep it went.
And how would you describe Todd's relationship with the ranch towards the end of his relationship with Christy and then after her death?
And after her death?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the same way that I saw him before he got the ranch, which was, why are you buying a ranch up in Northern California? Because all I ever knew Todd as was a producer. He produced movies. He was a recording engineer. These are the things that he did. He built things. He built studios and stuff like that. And so from him doing that to all of a sudden going, hey, let's put on a straw hat over here and go farming, it was like, it just didn't make sense to me before it happened. And then it didn't make sense to me after it happened, because my big question is, as sad as it was to lose Christy, what are you going to do now? Are you going to come back to us? And us was was all the people that he had left. So I didn't know why. I just knew he wasn't a farmer. He wasn't a rancher or a farmer. He was an engineer. He was a producer.
So what did you believe would happen with the ranch after Christie's death?
What did I think was going to happen to it? I probably would call him, I don't know, whenever I talked to him, I'd go, so what, are you going to sell the ranch? It was a lot of like, are you going to sell the ranch stuff, because that's what I thought he wanted to go in that direction.
And when you used the phrase come home to us, were you talking in Vegas?
Yeah, at the time I was. Yeah.
So let's talk about, because we've already heard Todd and Catherine's version of their reintroduction. I'd like to hear your version of it because you were so central to that moment. Can you describe first seeing Catherine again after many years, and then the reintroduction between Todd and Catherine?
Well, what had happened was I was on Facebook one day, and I think I saw her picture, and I was like, Catherine Hickland, my gosh, I haven't seen her for years. And somehow we connected. I can't remember. I think we wrote each other, little texts on Facebook or something like that. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I live in Vegas. She went, Vegas? What are you doing in Vegas? I told her what I was doing in Vegas. And she said, I just left that place. I just went to a book signing. I went, where? And it was Barnes & Noble, I believe, which was very close to our house. And she said, I'm coming back to do another one. I went, great. So she came back and she said, will you meet me there? Bobby's going to be there with me. Bobby's her brother. So I said, sure. So I went to the signing, and we were going to just have some coffee afterwards, but she ended up signing so many autographs that we didn't have time to go. So I said, well, why don't you come to my house? My wife would love to meet you. So they came to my house. And when they came to my house, she kind of looked around and went, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful community and a beautiful house. I mean, are there any other houses like this for sale? And I went, as a matter of fact, there are, because it was the low part of the real estate business. And so she went back to New York and then came back, and this is fuzzy, but I think what happened is when she came back the second time, she stayed at the Trump Towers for a while. And I went over and saw her. I think my wife and I went over and saw her, and I said, what are you doing here? And she was like, well, I'm staying here. I want to move here. And I said, well, why don't you just move in with us for a while? So she did. So she came and stayed at our house for a couple of months, and that parlayed into her end up buying the Greystone Spencer house. And then we started working together. Yeah. Yeah. Then we started working together, and she had told me, she said, I'm working on a hypnotic show that I want to put together in New York. Will you help me with that? And I went, sure. So she came to my house. I have a recording studio down there. And we started working on that. And at the same time that was happening, Debbie had called me, and she wanted me to help her work on the Christmas show that year. And so I'm dealing with Debbie, and I'm also dealing with Kat, who's sitting next to me. And one day while we were working, the phone rings, and it was Todd. She didn't know that, and he's asking me what's going on with Debbie's show. He was interested, of course. He was involved with the Christmas show too. And I started explaining to him what was going on with the show, and hung up. No, he asks me, what else are you doing? And I said, I'm working with Catherine Hickland. And he said, Catherine Hickland, I said, yeah, do you remember her? And he said, yeah, from The Hiding Place. And I went, yeah. So he's looking up Kat's Facebook page or whatever, her website, and he sees her and he goes, wow, she's very pretty, isn't she? And I went, yeah, she's very pretty. And that was about it. And he hung up, and that was that. And I get off the phone, and she says, who was that? And I said, Todd Fisher. She goes, Todd Fisher? From The Hiding Place, Debbie Reynolds' son? And I went, yeah. And so she was going, oh, wow, and so things started like connecting And I had no idea what was going on. I mean, this is kind of a weird story because when you're involved with somebody that you have no idea what's going to happen, you just watch this thing because you don't have any control over it at all. And so the next thing I knew is we weren't working together for like maybe a week, and Kat comes back into the studio to work with me, and she's on the phone, whispering in the background. I'm working on her hypnotic show or something. And she gets off the phone. I said, "Who was that?" And she goes, "That was Todd." And I went, "Oh, okay, so now you and Todd are talking all the time together." And she said, "Yeah, and this sparkle and everything started happening." And I went, "Okay, whatever." And then the next thing that happened is I believe she either hurt her, I'm trying to remember these significant things. I think she either hurt her foot or her ankle or something like that. Her foot was in a boot. I think she had a crutch. And while all that was happening, Todd wanted to come down and see her. And she didn't want that to happen. And I understood it, and because of what she looked like. He didn't care. And so he just said, "Well, I want to come down and see you." And she went, "Well, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that." And he went, "Well, I'm just going to call up Henry and come down and see him." Because he knew that she lived around the corner anyway. So he did that. He comes out. The van drives up in front of my house, or the motorhome, drives up in front of the house. And I hopped into the motorhome and found out she was going to come over. So in the back of the motorhome is a camera, and I live on a cul-de-sac, so there's only one way to get into the street. And I had known Todd almost 50 years by then, and he was like, I'd never seen him do this before, but he was like a little nervous kid that was like in this, and we've all gone through this, everybody in this room, this giddy kind of love thing that was like churning up inside of him, and I could see it. I was like, I'd never seen this before. And we were playing guitars, and every time a car would come up, we'd see it on a screen in front of us. He would go, "Is that her? Is that her?" "No, that's not her." Because I knew what her car looked like. "Was that her?" "No, that's not her either." "Well, how about that? Is that her?" "Nope, that's not her." Finally, her car drives up and pulls up in front of the motorhome. She gets out, limping out, and he gets out of the motorhome. And I watched this thing that had started in my studio with a phone call. I watched this thing mature right in front of me, and they had never seen each other. They had just been talking on the phone. And he gets out of the motorhome, and she goes up to the front of the motorhome where the stairs are, and they give each other a gigantic hug and a big kiss. And I went, wow, that is just... And if you don't mind me just saying this one thing, I just want to back up a little bit. After Christy died, when you have a close best friend, when that best friend loses a significant other like that, you automatically, if you love your best friend like that, you care for the person, and you go, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay," And so I had gone to the house after Christy died, after the ceremony that we had for her, everything. Remember sitting in a jacuzzi with him and just looking at him and going, are you going to be okay with this whole thing? And he was like very quiet. It's not like Todd, as you know. He's just very quiet and docile. And I even think he was crying a little bit, and I'd never seen him cry. And so I left the ranch that day with this, knowing that Todd had this real empty thing inside of him. And I was like, God, I was hoping. And people, some of his best friends were also talking to me. "Did you talk to Todd? Whatever, how's he doing?" And all that to say that there was this cavity, this empty thing inside of his system. And so back to the motorhome. So when he got out of the motorhome that day and hugged Kat, I saw something. I saw this almost like a completion of that empty feeling. Just it was filled. It was filled back up, and I was like so happy for him at that moment. And I just let it be. I didn't interrupt anything, and I said, "Come on, let's go in the house and get some food." So they walked into my house and sat down at the table. We had some spaghetti that night. Neither of them liked tomatoes, and they found out at the table I don't like tomatoes. I don't like tomatoes either. And I thought that was kind of cute. They went down into my theater, and they sat there for, I don't know, maybe an hour or so with Todd's dog, Yippee. And then they got up and left and said goodbye. They hopped into the motorhome. She hopped into her car and went over to the Grace Spencer house, which was around the corner from us. And that was it. I think Todd stayed there for like a few months. The only thing that happened after that was significant is the HOA there will not allow you to have a motorhome parked in your driveway for more than, I think, 2 days. Get it out. So he had to get the motorhome, which was really annoying to him, and bring it down to a place called the Oasis, which is on that street, Blue Diamond. And that was it. And then they stayed. Do you want me to keep going with
Can
this?
you just let me just for the panel can you put a timestamp on roughly when that first meal occurred? That I'm getting out of the motorhome and having dinner with you and your wife.
2000. Well, I think we did the show. If I'm correct, I think we did the New York show, August of 2009. So it was around that same time era. Okay. And then he stayed there at the at Kat's house for a while, and then I think he said, like, hey, nice place, but I got to get something bigger, and they moved to a smaller house, and I can't remember the name of the street. It started with a D, Dorset or something. I can't remember the name of that street, but they moved into there for about a year as they were planning and looking for a bigger house. The house is in our community. There's a small version, which was the Dorset house. Then there was a larger version, which was the Grace Spencer house. And but Todd needed something bigger than that. He was used to the ranch and big, and so they kept looking and looking and looking, and finally found the Joe Ray compound.
At that point in time, was there any doubt in your mind that Todd was moving permanently to Las Vegas?
No, none at all.
There have been some questions raised about Debbie Reynolds and her physical location during these years in issue and then after. What can you tell us about where Debbie sort of was physically located during these 2011, 2012 years, if you remember? I know it's a long time ago.
Well, from what I remember is Debbie was all around. She was always moving. She was always entertaining and going from different venues to the next. And also she was doing movies at that time. She was also doing a lot of TV appearances at that time. And so she was always on the road. That's all I remember about Debbie. Always on the road, and never, if she landed, she might land in her house in Burbank or North Hollywood. Sometimes she would be out with Todd in Vegas at that time, and just keep moving around. And I didn't really see, excuse me, I didn't really see her settle down and be happy and solid again until they bought the Joe Ray house, and they built a beautiful little living place. It was outstanding, and that's where she stayed. She loved that place because she loved, from what I remembered about Debbie all the time, she always loved being around people. She didn't like being alone. She liked, the commune thing, and so.
Henry, I think I am done with questions for you. I will see if we require any redirect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Mr.
Hi.
Catrona. My name is Ellen Swain. I represent the Franchise Tax Board. I just have a couple of questions. I just wanted to make sure that I understood your testimony that you assisted with preparation for the auction.
Well, in a sense of taking pictures out of movies and getting those pictures and having them put into some sort of a presentation for the people that were going to the auction and looking at it and turning pages and going, oh, look at this item and that item. That was about all I did.
So you helped with the catalog.
Yes, the pictures of the catalog.
And you were in Creston when you were helping with the catalog.
Both places.
And you understood that the full collection was in Creston to prepare for the auction.
I don't know at that time, I don't know where where all of the costumes were because they were around. I just know that they were scattered a little bit.
And that everything that was sold was in Creston prior to the auction, to prepare it for the auction.
I don't know if they all came from Creston. I know Debbie had the subway dress, which I went up and saw. So she had some high-end items in her place, in her condo in Vegas. And but I don't know. And there was other things that were in her studio in Burbank. So I don't know if they brought stuff down from there. She brought stuff over there. People were always picking things up and bringing them to other places. So I can't sit here and say they were all in Creston and they all came down from Creston. I don't know that.
Right. And it sounds like you weren't really involved with inventorying items and knowing where everything would be.
No.
That wasn't your thing.
No.
You were an electronics person.
I was what?
You were an electronics person.
Well, yeah, but if he said, hey, we're getting ready for this and that, we need to get some pictures together for the catalog over here. Can you help me? Sure. And sometimes I would do that in my studio in Vegas, and sometimes I would go up to the ranch.
Right. So you weren't somebody who worked with clothing.
Clothing?
Costumes.
No.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ms. Taranchik, did you want to redirect your witness?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Hearing Officer Parker, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Judge Gass, do you have any questions?
No questions.
I also have no questions. I want to make sure that we are all aware of the time. We are running a little short. We want to make sure that we have time as well for cross-examination and also for Franchise Tax Board to make its presentation. So if we could make sure that we're staying focused with the next witness as to the relevant years on appeal, that would be helpful. And if you could please call your next witness, that would be great. Before we do that, can you state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Fred, F-R-E-D, or Frederick, F-R-E-D-R-I-C, Wallachy, W-A-L-E-C-K-I.
Thank you. And Mr. Wallachy, now if you could raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, Fred, because this is being transcribed, if you could speak directly into the microphone so she could hear you, that'd be great. And even if you could look at her when responding instead of me, it might make it a little easier for her to take down your words, okay? Fred,
Are you saying that I have a speech impediment?
Yes. Would you like to explain to the panel what happened? Why you have this speech impediment?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but smoking didn't help. I stayed with my house in Malibu in the big fire, and after that I started speaking like Bill Clinton after the election, the very hoarse voice. And it got more and more progressive, and around 2000, it was hard to understand. It went from sounding like Marlon Brando in the movie about the mafia and all that to really having a hard time talking. So I had been going to Mayo Clinic for every 3 months for 2 years. And finally, they said, you're going to have a full laryngectomy. And I had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I was offered chemotherapy and radiation and all these alternatives. And I kept remembering Mayo saying, you need a full laryngectomy. And that was the safest thing to do, is just to remove that all. It was a hideous operation, and it was the kind of thing where they cut down here and they bring your head back like a Bez machine, and they remove everything. And anyway, my 6-year-old is alive and well, and he's now 30. 31, and my daughter is no longer 2 years old, and she's working for the Atlantic magazine.
Thank you, Fred.
My life is good.
Let's jump up a bit. Can you just explain briefly your family's history in music and relationship to Westwood Music?
Absolutely. I grew up as a music store brat. In other words, I would learn an instrument until I got bored and then learn another instrument. And anyway, when I graduated from high school, my dad started to become ill. And I went to City College for a short time just because that's what I was supposed to do. I never thought about taking over the music store. But it was a full-line music store just south of UCLA. It was the place that, musicians went. My father sold rare violins and harps. When all us kids were born, Harpo Marx gave our mother 1 year diaper service. My dad was very involved with the symphony musicians and so on and so forth. And when he died, I was almost 20, and I couldn't sell rare violins and I couldn't sell harps. And I decided, since there was a folk music place next door to the music store, I had befriended a lot of the folk musicians. I went to high school with Bonnie Raitt. I went to high school with Steve Kahn, Johnny Mercer's kid, Jeff Mercer. And, the idea of being around the music business, I was comfortable with. And so later on, when I started to meet people that were just starting out, like Jackson Browne, we became very close. That is around the time that I met Todd Fisher through Jerry Beckley from America. And I got a call from Beckley, and he said, "Hey, have you heard about this guy, Todd Fisher?" I said, yeah, I have. He's buying a lot of good microphones. And he said, yeah, he's got a sound truck. And they're having kind of like a party. And I went, well, let's go to the party. And sure enough, it was gorgeous. The soundtrack. It was all top drawer. He had a Spectrasonics board that sounded fabulous, but periodically caught fire. And he had the beautiful microphone array, and he was good at what he did.
Fred, let me stop you here, because I don't want to run out of time on this. Did there come a time where you started to work with Todd, with the museum, with the old museum in Vegas?
Oh, yeah. I worked with Todd on almost every project that he had, one way or another, putting in the sound system at the Naval Weapons Center. And so when Debbie showed up, I mean, it was remarkable. She was such a remarkable person. You know, she showed up on the correct day for this auction, but everybody else got the day wrong. So she bought the hotel. The Battle Wheel, as I remember, was a coup. And of course, Todd was always the one person that Debbie and Gary could count on for everything, no matter what. Now, he could do anything. I mean, literally anything. He worked to help me when I was selling high quality audio gear as the warranty station for a very well-known recording equipment company. Anyway, we supplied everything for the Debbie Reynolds Hotel. I mean, anything audio, we did it. If I didn't have a franchise for it, Todd would do his Todd thing and he would get it. Todd had the ability to talk to a lot of people. You know, case in point, one day he decided he wanted to talk to the captain of the atomic aircraft carrier Enterprise. So Todd starts at the first place and he ends up on the bridge with the captain of the Enterprise. So Todd could get me all these franchises that if I had a difficult time, he would get it. And we had a fabulous time. I love that hotel, man.
And unfortunately, we know that the hotel did come to an end. Did you then move on to work with Todd on the Pigeon Forge Museum in Tennessee?
I did go to Pigeon Forge. I actually brought my family there, and we looked at all the different designs, et cetera, and I had claim to the place. I was going to have a music store across from the museum. And all this was going to be great. And then, of course, that was at the time where all the banks went upside down.
On that note, can you explain your understanding of sort of what happened with the finances between or behind the museum and Pigeon Forge?
Well, I mean, everything came to a screeching halt. The idea of having the museum there was no longer possible. So,
what do you think the impact was on Debbie and on Todd personally when that blew up, when that dream ended?
Well, it was really shocking because that would have been the ultimate place. I mean, you know, that's where Dolly World was. And they have millions of people that go to this weird little town, Pigeon Forge. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you just can't. There are so many hardware and machinery stores because the husbands go to the hardware and machinery stores and gun shops, and the women go to see the shows. I mean, it is a strange place, but it would have been fantastic. I was excited, man. I was ready to bail and just go to Pigeon Forge.
Can you explain your personal relationship with the Fisher Reynolds family? How close were you?
I thought I was pretty doggone close. I loved Debbie, and Debbie loved me, and I got the biggest kick out of Carrie. Man, she was the smartest woman I had ever met. She was unbelievable. I mean, she had just, I mean, she was such a brain. And, you know, the family was really close.
And can you talk a little bit, I actually messed up your testimony and Henry's earlier. Can you talk a little bit about Todd's first wife, Christy, and your relationship with her?
I loved Christy. Todd loved Christy. And sober, Christy was amazingly wonderful. I mean, she was definitely a horsewoman. And, but she was a periodic alcoholic.
And can you explain why that was relevant, particularly for you?
Well, it was relevant for me because all my friends were either getting into horrible trouble in '79 or they were dying, like Lowell George Littlefeet died. Graham Parsons was a close friend, he died. And I had had a number of things happen in my life.
Fred, I'm sorry, can you just say those two names again?
Oh, Graham Parsons. Yeah, he was well known for that time where the body was stolen after he died and taken out to Joshua Tree and burned, that was quite the story. But anyway, and Lowell George, leader of Little Feet, great songwriter, great guy, and he died. And I was walking down the ramp to the forum, and Graham Nash was walking up with his then girlfriend, soon to be his wife, Susan. And he looks at me and he goes, "Fred, how is your health?" And a few weeks later, Linda Ronstadt said, "Fred, you should take over my beach house while I'm on the road. You've been burning the candle at both ends. You need to just cool out." And the Graham Nash thing and then Linda's thing, I got to cool out. So I stayed in Linda's house without leaving for 10 days. It was in Malibu Colony. I couldn't afford the taxes on the place, And we had there was a guy that would make make all new fireplaces in the house every day. There was a woman that would water the plants every day. I had nothing to do. I just get sober. So I quit in '79. So all along, my relationship with Lowell, a lot of the rockers were trying to prove that there's life after sobriety and that it's okay to drink things that don't catch fire, So.
I've heard you described as the Guru AA sponsor. Can you sort of describe then how that sort of colored your relationship with Christy in her last years?
Well, I was very abrupt, in most people's eyes when I talk about the person doesn't have an alcohol problem. They quit drinking and they still have problems. So I was very out front with her. And, we would go through these things together, and I would talk to her and she would, was gonna go to meetings, and she did. She would go to meetings, but she was the real McCoy. There are certain people, and I would say 60, maybe 70% of the people that I've worked with are just party Vikings. They're not the real McCoy. Where, she would get 4 bottles of vanilla extract and drink that. Or she would buy the big bottle of mouthwash and drink that. And that was really hard on her liver and body. I mean, I would see her and, her epicaphic folds were puffy and face puffy and, otherwise, sober, she was beautiful and great and,
Can you describe how that impacted, from your perspective, Todd's relationship with Christy?
Well, it was one of those things where he would love her through these things, And, he had had a lot of experience with people that, like with, Carrie was no stranger to taking an in-town, out-of-town vacation using whatever vehicle it took, whether it was pills or, she definitely was an alcoholic. I mean, so, he was used to dealing with kind of that mentality, which kind of made it happen, made it possible, where he just didn't throw up his arms and go, "I'm over." He stayed with her till the end, and with it, he loved her.
So it was a very difficult end. How would you describe Todd's feelings about the ranch once Christy passed away?
Well, I've got to say that, she would do her horses, but Todd would do Todd stuff. In other words, he buys this, and I went with Todd when he first looked at the house, and it was a gingerbready little house, later to be totally redone by Todd. So she would be doing the horses, and he would be doing this complex heating and cooling system that was, outrageous with pipes everywhere, and that he did. The one thing about Todd is, he would wake up in the morning and work all day, and that's when he met Kat. Well, I loved it because she was the same way. I mean, you have two workaholics, and he was used to that actress mentality. I mean, she was a very, Kat was a well-known soap opera star, and he was very comfy with actresses.
So, Fred, let me ask you on that note. Prior to meeting Kat, after Christy has died, were you worried about Todd and his relationship status and those kinds of issues?
Everybody was trying to get him fixed up with somebody, I tried. I had this great ex-girlfriend that I was, hoping that he would. Actually, it was when he met Kat. It was like that was it for my ex-girlfriend.
Can you now describe sort of when you became aware of Kat in Todd's life and the impact on Todd?
Well, I had talked to Todd, and he had, talked about this girl that he had met through Henry, and they had just talked over the phone at that time. But he was enthusiastic, and I was enthusiastic, like, yes, good, we've got somebody for Todd, And, I think I called Henry and said, "So, Henry, what's going on?" But no, the two were.
Fred, can I stop you for just 1 second? Your phone is flashing a light. Can we just put that down on the...
I got it.
Thank you. I'm sorry, continue. Kat and Todd.
So anyway, I kept kind of track of that. Then the next thing I know is he moved his motorhome over to Henry's and to meet Kat, and after that it was just like it's all over, man. He was out of Creston like a rat up a pipe.
Why do you think, with some of this background we've been talking about, why do you think they had such a powerful connection that was so immediate?
Well, look at the things they had in common. They both had been married previously to people with alcohol problems. He grew up, in a family with actors and singers, and they have a different sort of a life. Like, for instance, my sister's a concert artist, and we think nothing about her going to Europe. It's like, I know, she's going to Europe. It was like no big deal. It's just one of those things where they go periodically, and that's part of life. It's not, And so he meets this woman that we had tried to set him up with a couple of people, that the mother of the Griswolds. That didn't work. There were a number of things that didn't work. But anyway, when they met, everything was just too much the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I heard what Kat was saying about she and Debbie bonding. I mean, of course. Now, I mean, I mean, this is my own opinion. If you can find somebody, like if a girl can find somebody who's very much like her father, it's gonna be good. And all of a sudden, here is this very, very nice lady who is absolutely on the road to. I mean, his mother was the unsinkable Molly Brown. The things that she went through in life with different men that she was married to, etc. And here comes Kat, and she's beautiful. She's an actress. More importantly, she spends her whole day working from morning till night. She doesn't sunbathe. She's in her business doing something. And Todd's one of those people that is exactly the same way.
Fred, let me ask you a final question here. When Catherine and Todd met, where did you believe Todd desired to live at that point?
Oh, well, obviously, he was in Las Vegas having just the time of his life, really.
Did you see him much in California
No,
following
there
that?
was no seeing Todd. I'm sorry. You had to drive 5.5 hours if you wanted to go see your friend. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it.
Oh.
I have
By
no
the way,
further
did we
questions.
take a lunch break? I feel like a member of the Donner Party.
Sure.
Do you need a quick break for your voice?
No, I'm okay. I've been in far more dangerous situations than this.
It looks like Franchise Tax Board is signaling that they don't have questions.
We do not have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hearing Officer Parker, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Judge Gast?
No questions, thank you.
I also have no questions. Franchise Tax Board will be making their presentation next. I've been asked by our one of my colleagues to take a break so that the presentation can be set up. So we're going to take 10, and we will resume at 12:25. Is everyone ready to continue? Okay. Ready? All right. Ms. Swain, you may begin when you're ready. You have 45 minutes.
Thank you, Judge. My name is Ellen Swain, as I've said, and I'm from the Franchise Tax Board. And I'm going to just address the sourcing issues. But before I start that, I just wanted to express my appreciation to our really amazing stenographer, Ms. Alonzo. The only time we heard from you is when we were literally talking on top of each other, and thank you for your professionalism. I know this is a hard job. And I think the other piece, too, is that the fact that I've been in litigation for a good portion of my career, and I started young, and one of the things that I have the greatest appreciation for is when somebody will push their position and they will say, I don't agree with you. And they will stand up to that, and they will continue to stand up to that, and they will bring that claim, and they will provide the information, and they will go while that process unfolds, which is not easy for anyone. And then you come to the day of dispute. And the utmost respect to you, sir, because that is not an easy process. It takes courage and indomitation. Your indomitable spirit. Or unsinkable, I suppose, would be on theme for today. But our respect to that. Because really what this case is about, what the sourcing case comes down to, is it's a burden of proof case. This is really, the reason we're here is because through all of that work and through all of that effort that came through, all the questions we've asked, we've come to a dispute. We've just fundamentally hit the place where we say we don't agree. And Mr. Fisher doesn't have to capitulate to what the FTB says. He doesn't. He has every right to come here and say, no, I don't agree with you, and I want to put my case before 3 judges. Because this is a tax case, the burden of proof sits on the appellant's square shoulders. They need to prove that FTB was operating with error when we issued the assessments. It's their burden. That's not my choice. That's not anyone's choice in this room. It's what the law says. And that's the stance that they have to come in. And that's the heart of the sourcing case. We respectfully disagree. We respectfully do not believe they've met that burden of proof. And that's all that this case is about. And so much of this case and this testimony, it's not relatable. It's a very special, unique world. And it's about the sale of items that are unique and valuable and have a very special place in our cultural lexicon. But when we look at the qualities of the tangible personal property, we get to the heart of this sourcing case. The tangible personal property can deteriorate if it's not properly cared for, and it can be stolen if it's not watched out for. So really the question in this case is, where do you put those things? Where do you store things like that? Especially when they're cherished and they want to be saved for the preserved for the sake of posterity. So it just comes down to where were they placed? Where were they put? And that's the burden that the appellants have to meet to show you and to prove. So we submit that the appellants haven't met this burden, and we submit that the items were located in California, which is the finding under 17951-3 in the event that the panel is to find that Mr. Fisher, and then when he was married to Ms. Hickland in the 2012 tax year, was not a resident of the state of California, that he's a non-resident, then we trigger the sourcing analysis. If he's a non-resident, the test is very simple. It's where are these items located? And what we know is that there is no case law that interprets the word location in that statute. There's no dispute about the fact that where's the property located is the test. That's 17951-3, and that applies to the sale of tangible personal property. There's no dispute that it's tangible personal property. There's no dispute that it was sold. There's no dispute that the gain occurred from two auctions held in 2011, one in June and one in December. There's no dispute that the income from the December auction was likely reflected in 2012 because he's a cash basis taxpayer and that's when he gets the money. We don't have any disputes about those things. Our whole dispute is about where were these items located. And so what does that mean? If we don't have a case law determining, we look at the plain language, right? What is located? Where is located? It's a word that has a physicality to it. You're in the borders. It's somewhere within the borders of California. If you were to find, for instance, it was located in Nevada, you would find that it's not California source income when sold. But you don't look to New York case law to determine what that standard is. You just don't. And the auditor said that from the jump. It's a state sourcing question. State law applies. But one of the things we can look at is that we do have some interesting case law by analogy in the multi-state context. And that is the case of the appeal of Gibson Wine Company, which was obviously a very old case. It was from the 1958, I believe it was a 1946 tax year, but it involved an out-of-state company, out-of-state partnership, and they took ownership of wine, and the wine was being held in warehouses in California. And part of that process was it was being cured. It wasn't in bottles you're ready to buy. It was in its process of becoming drinkable, saleable wine. And what the Board of Equalization found in that case is they found that that's California property. And that's California property for the purposes of the property payroll and sales factor, which is the three-factor apportionment that was used at that time. And they said, yeah. And the appellant said, no. It shouldn't be California property. It's not in California because its ultimate destination is going to be someplace else. And that was not disputed by the Franchise Tax Board at that time. They said, you're right. It's going to be disputed. That's fine if it's moved someplace else. But that's not the question. The question is, it was located that year. And that's a helpful case. Again, it's not on point, but it's helpful by analogy to talk about how has located been, when locating something that is movable, which is what we have here too. How do you pin that thing down, right? And that was a helpful case for that reason, and that's 56 State Board of Equalization 006. And we also know from Mr. Fisher's declaration that those items were all of the family items, which were apparently some of the highest ticket items, these special items we've talked about, the Marilyn Monroe dress that's worn in the 7-Year Itch, the subway dress, and the ascot dress. We'll talk a moment about those again. Those items were all in California in 2010 and 2011. And the first auction occurs in June 2011. There's a special facility in Creston that had both the storage facility, but it also had all, elaborate studio and photography equipment that was used to prepare these items for the auction. So we know it was located. FTB's position is that's sufficient. That's sufficient. But we can go back in time, and we can also say that we know that this warehouse was built in 1998. We know that that was 13 years before the auction. And we also know that as of 2009, there were more than in $2,009, which were predating the sale. And as has the testimony that's been brought here today, is that the sale prices surprised the Fishers and Debbie Reynolds. They were surprised in a very pleasant way. So we know these are conservative estimates. $10.5 million worth of assets, $10.5 million of costumes were stored in Creston. And the reason we know that is because that's what the affidavit said in the bankruptcy proceedings, the Chapter 11 proceedings that were filed in June of 2009. So we know as of that date, 100% of that list, 32-page list of costumes and items related to movie memorabilia were located in Creston, California. And it was described in that document, which is Exhibit G, as 10,000 square feet of climate-controlled storage, specially designed for that purpose. And that's where FTB's position comes from. Our position is that these items were all kept in the place that was designed to keep them. Could there be other places? Could they be moved around? That doesn't dispute the fact that they were located, and it doesn't dispute the fact that they were located as of 2010 and 2011. So if we look at some of these, this is the subway dress. We all know the subway dress. Or many people do. It's a very popular image. And this is the ascot dress. The subway dress sold for $4.5 million. The ascot dress sold for $3.7 million. You can also see the bonnet that would be with that. These are photographs from 2009. On the right, in Exhibit D of Mr. Fisher, holding the Julie Reynolds dress and guitar from The Sound of Music. And this is in the Creston warehouse. And here is a brief tour. I'll have to give you some sound for that.
Actually, Ms. Swain, I believe we've all watched based on the links. Can we just skip forward and talk about it?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so thank you for watching that. So what this shows, and I will turn that off. This shows Mr. Fisher in the warehouse, and it shows the specialty. It shows the fact that these items had a special room. This is the sewing room, and that they were stored with special acid-free paper, that there were people that were handling them while wearing white gloves, and they're put in acid-free boxes. So there's a second reason. The reason for preserving them in the place where you can preserve them isn't just to prevent theft. It's to prevent the deterioration of the fabrics, which, as the testimony has come out, is that the ultimate driving force for Debbie Reynolds in those early years in particular, as it went on and through all that they did, was to maintain these for posterity purposes. But all the things you do to maintain them for posterity purposes also maintains them for resale purposes. It just happens to be that those two things are united. So it keeps them in the safest place, is to have them and have the ability to have them in that place. And the next piece that we talk about, we saw that the subway dress was in the auction, was in Creston. And we also saw in this film clip, which you have seen, we see that there was secure storage within. And what I mean by that is there was literally a safe inside with a combination safe to open up, and that's where the 2 pairs of ruby slippers were stored. And that's what that film clip, as you know, shows. And so when we know that those items are there, and we know that there's been so much care and attention into putting a place where you can have items preserved, not stolen. Obviously, the ruby slippers literally under lock and key. And when you think about an item like the ruby slippers, they're so valuable, they're old, they're fragile, and they're so widespread. Everybody knows them. All you have to say is click your heels, and people know what that reference means. And what that means for the purpose of tangible personal property and tax law is that when you have something that's worth that much money and there's only a limited supply, you're going to want to be careful about where you put it, especially when it's something that's small enough you could stick it in your backpack and conceal it and walk away. And that's really where the assessment comes from, is this idea that the preciousness drove their location. Their location was the place in Creston, because the place in Creston was where they were both seen, many of these items seen, but they were also, could be preserved. They could be preserved. We also know, the final point I'll transition into, is that there was concern about who would bear the risk of loss. And that's interesting too, because there was, the only information we have about an insurance policy on these items is in the bankruptcy documents themselves. There's an unsecured creditor, who's Mr. Stephen Fetterman, and his debt that was owed him in those documents in Exhibit G was approximately $34,000. We know that there was an insurance policy, unpaid balance. The unpaid balance was $34,000 to insure these costumes. And it's not, well, we'll buy you another pair of ruby slippers. It's like, well, we have to compensate you for that loss because this is a special and unique piece of valuable personal property. We don't have any other insurance records. That's where the items were insured to be kept, or that's where items were insured to be kept. Might they have at some point been in the Las Vegas condo? Perhaps. Might they have been seen there? We've had testimony about them being seen there, about Debbie Reynolds being there and wanting them to be seen there. That is not inconsistent with what we're saying. That is not inconsistent with what we're saying. Could they have been brought there at some point, at some time? Sure. But that is not what we are saying is the overarching view of where this tangible personal property was located. And again, we certainly know it was all located in 2010 to 2011, and that is sufficient to find that the items were located in California. They created California source income at the time of sale. And that brings us back to the returns. And that's my final point. On the returns, nothing was sourced to the state of California. Not $1 of gain was sourced to the state of California. And interestingly, we've had testimony that, in fact, that column A on Form 4797 was rental property, was display property that was used to display the items in California. And that gain is not reflected on the returns. At a minimum, that gain is, the testimony is that gain, that would be California source gain. And I think what's telling is I think that there might have been at the time, perhaps by the accountant who testified, that he didn't source the income because Mr. Fisher was not living in California. Well, that's not the test. The test is when you're a non-resident, you still have to pay income tax on items that are California source income. And the last point on tax is when these items were all sold at auction, and again, a record-breaking auction, record-breaking prices, $4.5 million, $3.7 million, 3,000 items sold, so much income. Sales tax was imposed. The catalog shows us that the buyers had to pay sales tax, California sales tax, on every item unless it was exempt. There were no instructions about what could have been qualified as an exemption. FTB, our final position is just that the assessment must be disproven. And we don't believe that it's our position that the appellants haven't carried this burden. It's a significant burden. And they haven't carried this burden. And that the items were located in California and their sale is California source income. Thank you. Forgive me, I forgot to mention that we're going to talk about residency. Mr. Hofstall pointed that out.
If you can move the podium, I hurt my knee and I can't stand up for. As Ms. Swain said, I'll be discussing the residency analysis, which will include a discussion of the relevant law and the interplay of the law to the facts before us. But as a preliminary matter, the years at issue here are 2011 and 2012, and specifically the period between January 1st, 2011 and January 20th, 2012. It's undisputed that Mr. Fisher was a California resident prior to January 13th, 2010. And while respondent determined that Mr. Fisher was a California resident during the entire 2010 taxable year, respondent did not make an adjustment to that year because that change did not affect Mr. Fisher's tax liability for that year. Therefore, while the facts of 2010 are relevant to the residency analysis, the 2010 tax year is not on appeal. What is disputed, however, is Mr. Fisher's residency at the time he and his family sold various pieces of Hollywood memorabilia at the Poly Center in Beverly Hills, California on two dates, June 12, 2011 and December 3, 2011. It's appellate's position that Mr. Fisher became a non-resident on or about January 13, 2010, a few weeks before he allegedly moved into Ms. Hickland's Las Vegas home. It's respondent's position that appellate continued to retain significant connections to California throughout the period at issue, and those connections outweigh his connections to Nevada during the same time period. As such, it's respondent's position that Mr. Fisher continued to be a California resident through at least January 20th, 2012. That being said, the ultimate question on appeal is whether the taxpayer met his burden to show that he not only acquired substantial new connections in Nevada, but that he severed his long-standing connections with California. I'll now discuss the relevant law to this appeal. The purpose behind California's taxation of residents is to ensure that individuals who are physically present in the state and enjoying the benefits and protections of its laws and government contribute to its support. This purpose underlies all residency decisions. Analyzing a taxpayer's connections, both within and without California, helps one to determine whether a taxpayer received the benefits and protections consistent with California residency. Also, it's well settled that a person could be a resident of more than one state or taxing jurisdiction at the same time. Determining California residency starts with the statute. Under Revenue and Taxation Code Section 17014A, a California resident includes both individuals inside California, regardless of domicile, for other than a temporary or transitory purpose, and individuals domiciled in California who are outside of California for a temporary or transitory purpose. Thus, the determination of Mr. Fisher's residency is essentially a two-part test that starts with determining Mr. Fisher's domicile and concludes with weighing factors to determine whether Mr. Fisher was either inside California for other than a temporary or transitory purpose or outside California for a temporary or transitory purpose.
Mr. Hostel,
Yes.
Can you take it back like 10% slower?
Yes.
Thank you.
If it's determined that Mr. Fisher was domiciled outside of California, he could only be deemed a California resident under subsection A1. If it's determined that Mr. Fisher was domiciled in California, he could be deemed a California resident under both subsections A1 and A2. Here, under these facts, it's clear that Mr. Fisher qualifies as a California resident under both subsections. I'll first summarize the domicile analysis. In determining whether Mr. Fisher changed his domicile, two things are indispensable. First, residence in the new locality, and second, the intention to remain there. Furthermore, as pointed out in the recent appeal of Mazur, Mr. Fisher's actions must support a change of domicile. Unsubstantiated statements do not suffice. Further, if there's doubt on the question of domicile, then domicile must be found to have not changed. While appellates mostly argue intent, and solely through these unsubstantiated statements, appellates essentially concede in their reply brief, specifically at page 7, lines 18 to 19, and in their self-prepared physical presence calendars, that Mr. Fisher's physical presence in Nevada was insignificant as compared to his physical presence in California in both 2010 and 2011. Rather, it appears that appellate's argument seems to be that but for all of his California connections, he would have been inside of Nevada. But consistent with the appeal of Tran and Medina, which admittedly is non-presidential, and Noble v. Franchise Tax Board, in move-out cases, excuses made attempting to explain the reasons for not leaving California are not persuasive. Further, Mr. Fisher filed as head of household for the 2010 and 2011 taxable years, and in so doing, conceded that the California ranch was his familial abode, a factor weighed heavily in evaluating a change in domicile. As such, the two prongs to demonstrate a change of domicile are not met here. Therefore, Mr. Fisher remained a domicile in California throughout the years at issue. As stated in the appeal of Mazur, the analysis then shifts to whether Mr. Fisher's purpose in either entering or leaving California is temporary or transitory in nature. The residency regulation provides guidance in this regard. The connections that a taxpayer remains with this state when compared with the other state are important indications of whether a person's entrance to or absence from California is temporary or transitory. In the appeal of Bragg, the Board of Equalization provided a list of non-exclusive factors that were helpful in evaluating a taxpayer's connections in prior appeals. In the appeal of Mazur, the factors discussed in Bragg were separated into three categories: physical presence and property, personal and professional associations, and registration and filings. As stated in the appeal of Bracamonte, the physical presence factor is given greater weight than mental intent in the formalities that tie one to a particular state. And further, as stated in the appeal of Cobb, a mere formalism, such as a change in registration or a statement that Mr. Fisher intended to be a resident of another state, does not ordinarily settle the issue. Appellate's relevant connections to both California and Nevada will now be discussed in the appropriate Maser groupings. In the first Maser category, I will discuss physical presence and property, starting with the physical presence factor. On Mr. Fisher's 2010 Schedule CA, Mr. Fisher reported that he was physically present in California for only 13 days during the 2010 taxable year. During the audit examination, Mr. Fisher provided self-reported calendars that showed he was in California for 156 days and in Nevada for 115 days during the 2010 taxable years. On the other hand, respondents' calendars, based on both Mr. Fisher's financial records and his calendars, reflect that Mr. Fisher was in California for 177 days and Nevada for 91 days. Moving to 2011, on Mr. Fisher's 2011 Schedule CA 540NR, he reported that he was physically present in California for 75 days. During the audit examination, Mr. Fisher provided self-reported calendars reflecting that he was in California for 151 days and in Nevada for 39 days during the 2011 taxable year. In other words, during the 2011 tax year, and under Mr. Fisher's own accounting, for every day spent in Nevada, Mr. Fisher spent 4 days in California. On the other hand, respondents' corresponding calendar, which, like for 2011, was based on both the financial transaction and Mr. Fisher's unsupported calendars, reflect that Mr. Fisher was physically present in California for 246 days and Nevada for 48 days during the 2011 taxable year. In other words, for every day spent in Nevada, Mr. Fisher was physically present in California for 5 days. One point I just want to make with regards to Mr. Fisher's calendars that he prepared. There's been a little discussion on the difference between the ranch in Creston and the property in Montana. But if you look at his calendars, Exhibit I, he clearly delineates his Montana days from his Creston days. Montana days are referred to as Montana, and for the 2010 tax year, he was in Montana for 10 days. Same as 2011, he was in Montana for 211 days. But more significant than that is his presence in his presence on his physical presence calendar is delineated as ranch when it comes to the Creston days. So going through the calendars, you can clearly delineate what they meant, or what the appellates meant by ranch and what they meant by Montana. In addition, the calendars are very, very thorough when it comes to the days he spent preparing for the auction, notwithstanding the days he was in California for other purposes. But regardless of which calendars you use, if you use Mr. Fisher's calendars or the calendars prepared by FTB, Mr. Fisher's physical presence in California significantly exceeded his presence in Nevada. Further, in the recent decision in the appeal of Peters, also non-presidential, is on point. On page 7 of the Peters decision, the panel found that in order to show error in respondents' calendars, one must provide proof of being outside of California during these disputed days. And importantly, unsupported assertions are insufficient to satisfy a taxpayer's burden of proof. And like the taxpayers in the appeal of Tran, Mr. Fisher continued to be inside of California for a significant period, overseeing his dependents, overseeing Creston Ranch activities and museum activities, and to be with family. This demonstrates that Mr. Fisher was inside California for other than a temporary transitory purpose. In addition, as came out in yesterday's testimony, it's noteworthy that all of Mr. Fisher's income for both the 2010, all of Mr. Fisher's W-2 wage income for both 2010 and 2011 were sourced to California. Therefore, the physical presence factor, which is generally given significant weight, clearly favors California. I'll now discuss the property factor. When analyzing the nature of Mr. Fisher's property, it's clear that Mr. Fisher continued to have a significant connection to his California abode. Mr. Fisher has owned the Creston Ranch since the 1990s. Significantly, on this property, Mr. Fisher constructed many, if not all, of the buildings, including a 10,000 square foot climate-controlled custom warehouse to store his and his family's collection of Hollywood memorabilia. Moreover, based on Mr. Fisher's head of household filing during the years at issue, the Creston Ranch was Mr. Fisher's familial abode, as the ranch was also the home to both Brandon and Eugene, the two people that formed the basis of Mr. Fisher's household filing in 2010 and 2011. It's also noteworthy that Mr. Fisher also claimed Eugene as a dependent in the 2012 tax year, and as stated in testimony yesterday, it's undisputed that both Brandon and Eugene were residing at the Creston Ranch. Since Brandon and Eugene were not Mr. Fisher's minor children, Mr. Fisher would have had to live with them for at least one half of the taxable year to qualify for head of household status. For both the 2010-2011 tax years, Mr. Fisher indicated on Form FTB 4803E that Brandon and Eugene lived with him for the entire year, which could only be true if Mr. Fisher was outside of California for a temporary or transitory purpose. Conversely, in Nevada, Mr. Fisher asserts that he had access to Grace Spencer Drive starting on January 24, 2010. While Grace Spencer Drive was owned by Ms. Hickland, it appears that her home was impermanent as to Mr. Fisher because, as Mr. Fisher testified, it did not meet their joint needs at that time. Ms. Hickland soon listed and eventually sold that property. Then, after Ms. Hickland sold Grace Spencer Drive towards the end of July 2011, appellates moved into a permanent rental located on Dornish Castle Street, where they looked for a home to fit their needs. It was only after their second auction, on or about January 20th, 2012, that Mr. Fisher had access to a permanent abode in Nevada, when appellates purchased a home located on J. Ray Avenue in Las Vegas. As the Creston Ranch was the only permanent familial abode that Mr. Fisher had during the period at issue, this factor, which should be given moderate weight, favors California the residency. In total, this Mazer category also favors California the residency. Now I'll discuss the second Mazer category, personal and professional associations. In this category, I will discuss the familial abode factor and the professional license factor. I'll first discuss the familial abode factor. During the 2011 taxable year, as mentioned above, Mr. Fisher filed head of household status, claiming both Brandon and Eugene as his dependents for the 2011 taxable year. Under the appeal of Varn, benefits received by one's dependents are de facto benefits received by the taxpayer. Therefore, by claiming Brandon and Eugene as dependents on his tax return, Mr. Fisher received benefits and protections from the state of California as well. Moreover, Ms. Hickland's blogs, which speak for themselves as to where they took place and what the intent was, reflect Mr. Fisher's permanent presence at the Creston Ranch and that she would frequently join him there. Additionally, when appellants decided to get married, they held their wedding ceremony at Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher's family compound in Beverly Hills, California. Therefore, this factor favors California residency. I'll now discuss the professional license factor. Mr. Fisher was issued a California contractor's license on September 12, 1988, which remain current through at least September 30th, 2022. And I believe Mr. Fisher testified yesterday or today that that license is still in effect. During the time period at issue, it does not appear that Mr. Fisher had a comparable contractor's license with the state of Nevada. While appellates argue that Mr. Fisher has not worked any project since a solar project in 1988, Fisher Electric reported gross receipts of $51,863 in 2010 and $9,543 in 2011 for consulting work. Further, Mr. Fisher argues that it was favorable for him to retain his California license so that he can get reciprocity in other states, like Nevada. That ability to get reciprocity is a benefit conferred by California. Since Mr. Fisher held a contractor's license a California contractor's license during the period at issue, and the license provided a benefit to him, like reciprocity in other states, this factor favors California. Therefore, the second major category, personal and professional associations, clearly favors California residency. Now moving to the third and last category, registrations and filings. In this category, I'll be discussing lawsuits, driver's licenses, personal transportation, and Secretary of State filings. I'll first discuss the lawsuit factor. On June 12, 2009, on behalf of the Hollywood Motion Picture Museum, Mr. Fisher filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in California. It appears throughout the pendency of this bankruptcy litigation that Mr. Fisher represented that both he and the artifacts were in Creston, California. Appellates confirm this at page 14, lines 14 to 17 of the reply brief. It does not appear that Mr. Fisher changed his address with the bankruptcy court during the pendency of this matter. Based on the representations Mr. Fisher made during the bankruptcy court filing, this lawsuit factor, which should be given slight weight, honestly, favors California with their residency. I'll next discuss the driver's license factor. Mr. Fisher claims that he applied for a Nevada driver's license on July 2nd, 2011, after the first auction, and about 1.5 years after Mr. Fisher claims that he moved to Nevada. For reasons not quite understood, it appears that that license was not issued until January 27th, 2012, within a few days of appellates purchasing the Joe Ray abode. Regardless, during the entire period at issue, Mr. Fisher's right to operate a vehicle on roadways was a benefit provided to him by the state of California. Since Mr. Fisher received his Nevada driver's license after the period at issue, and his rights to operate a motor vehicle during the period at issue was provided by the state of California, this factor also favors California the residency. I'll now move to the vehicle registration factor. Mr. Fisher owned multiple cars in California and Nevada. While Mr. Fisher registered vehicles in Nevada after the first auction, the only 2 vehicles purchased during the period at issue were purchased in California, with one of the vehicles being re-registered in Nevada after the receipts from the first auction were received. Therefore, this factor, which should be giving slight weight, honestly, slightly favors California the residency. The last factor I'll discuss is Secretary of State filings. During the period at issue, Mr. Fisher registered and re-registered businesses in California. On March 5th, 2010, 2 months after Mr. Fisher allegedly moved from California to Nevada, Ain't Down Productions, his mother's company, registered with the California Secretary of State. In the Statement of Information filed with the California Secretary of State for both the Hollywood Motion Picture and Television Museum and his mother's company, Ain't Down Productions, Mr. Fisher identified himself not only as an officer, but provided a California contact address. Additionally, on May 18, 2012, 2 years after Mr. Fisher alleges to have moved out of California, Freedom Farms Productions was registered with the California Secretary of State's office. That entity address is listed as 4124 North Ryan Road in Creston, California. So, to summarize Secretary of State filings, Mr. Fisher continued to register businesses with California Secretary of State after January 2010. For these reasons, the factor related to the Secretary of State filings favors California residency as well. As the overwhelming majority of factors in the registrations and filings category favors California residency, this third major category favors California residency as well. To conclude the residency portion of our presentation and to summarize the residency argument, during the period at issue, Mr. Fisher continued to remain domiciled in California and was absent, if at all, for temporary or transitory purposes. Moreover, for the periods at issue, Mr. Fisher was physically present inside California for other than a temporary or transitory purpose. Thus, under either residency test, Mr. Fisher received the benefits and protections from the state of California consistent with being a California resident, regardless of any connections he may have established outside of the state during the same period. And now, both Ms. Swain and I can answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question, and I'm looking at Appellant's Exhibit 17. This deals with the residency issue.
Sure.
For 2012, and it says specifically, after final review of the case at the next level and based on information available, we determined that Mr. Fisher became a non-resident on 1/20/12.
Yes.
The recorded closing date of the purchase of his Las Vegas, Nevada residence. It does go on to say that the tax is the same because of the sourcing issue. What is FTB's current position with respect to this letter that was issued?
Sure. As appellates pointed out in their reply brief, I believe, in one of the footnotes, 2012 was not audited for residency, and it's my understanding in having conversations what I believe happened, and like I said, is that the auditor who was new at the time, when she determined that he was a resident for 2011, when it came to the sourcing of that 2000 property, was applying essentially the same standard that you would in a installment sale. So when she assessed for 2012, she was essentially assessing under that theory. Since the auction took place in 2010, if the proceeds, as reflected in the tax and return, were reflected in 2012, that income was properly included. That's not the status of the law. And I think what happened was she was told. So after the auditor had filed the determination, the letter with the stuff, and after going back and forth, the closing of the letter, and when it came time to close out 2012, she mailed that letter out in order to close it. But there was no audit done at that year. It is, I think, unusual to base their residency on when a person that buys a home. I think it's a standard that, when it comes into to residency, the rules that apply inside to California apply to the people outside of California if you're moving in or moving out. So I think it would be a dangerous standard to have purchase of a home being that standard. But that being said, that's where that date came from, is that's what she attached it to. But I think when we looked at the testimony yesterday, when the OTA asked for proof of when that payment was actually received, they attached and provided Exhibit 30. And I think one of the things that was clear after the testimony yesterday, at least I hope so, was that the dates and what happened during that time period may not be true. Mr. Fisher did testify that he was the person who received the money from the auction house, and then he was the one that distributed to other people, including that January the 20th payment to First Bank, I believe it was. And then when he was asked about that ETF transfer or charge for a wire transfer on January 3rd, he also said that it's possible that that's when he received the money from the auction house as well. But regardless, the best evidence for when that money received is not Exhibit 30. As I tried to point out yesterday, the best evidence would have been the actual bank statements of when he received that income. So it's FTB's position that Exhibit 30, in light of what could have been produced and in light of the testimony yesterday, does not meet their burden of when that income was actually received.
Ms.
Judge,
Swain?
May I just clarify one item on the sourcing position? Just to clarify, the sourcing position in the audit report, it's spelled out on page 82 of the audit report, which states specifically that it's not sourced as an installment sale. It was sourced based on the location of the property. And the standard of 17951-3 was used. It wasn't a question of an installment sale, which would have been if you
Ms. Swain, can you use the microphone?
Sorry, can I have your mic?
Yeah.
Just to clarify, an installment sale would have been there is a rule that says if you're a resident at the time an item is sold, that you would then retain that residency status in the future for installment payments. We did not, that is not what happened in this case at audit. Just to clarify, what did happen at audit was a determination it's consistent with what I had argued, that 17951-3 was applied to say that the property was located in California, and that was for both of the two tax years.
Okay. Thank you. But I also want to clarify with respect to the residency issue in that letter. It's FTB's position currently that Mr. Fisher was a resident and domiciled in California in 2012, despite that letter. Is that correct?
It's FTB's position that he was domiciled and resident of California at least through January.
Okay. Thank you. Hearing Officer Parker, do you have any questions?
No, I think that handled it. Thank you.
Judge Gass, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just want to clarify with FTB, Ms. Swain, you mentioned installment sale, but that rule, if I remember, applies to intangible property, not TPP, correct? There is no installment
There's no
sale.
question. No, there's no
Okay.
installment. That was just a misstatement.
Okay,
I just
okay.
wanted to make sure we just struck that from the record.
Okay.
Yes, you're exactly right. It's 17952 regulation.
Okay, and we're not
Absolutely
in...
does not apply.
Okay, thank you. And we're not in, I think you mentioned this, but just to be extra clear, we're not in 17951-4 for a trade or business. We're not saying this is a trade or business, the sale of the memorabilia. We're just saying it's a sale of TPP, tangible personal property. Correct?
Yes, thank you, Judge. That is the reporting position that was taken, and that is how it was audited. We treated it as his personal property, this was his personal property versus TPP of a business. It's an interesting point because that was, in fact, what seemed a bit confusing in the reporting position at the federal level by having what appeared to have been, as Mr. DeSalvo testified, the ask address was reflected as business property, when in fact the position is really that it was personal property.
Okay, and then, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and just to clarify, when I was talking about an installment sale, I wasn't saying that the auditor felt it was an installment sale. I was just saying as far as how that kind of flowed into 2012. It's my understanding that was kind of what she was thinking, is that even though it was paid in a later month, but anyway, I don't want to confuse that anymore. But
Okay, and then my last question is, again, with sourcing, there's been a lot of disagreement about where this tangible personal property was located, but it's FTB's position that that doesn't matter because all of it was here at the time of the auction when it was sold, when the income was realized.
It was when the income was realized. It was in the year leading up to the year to at least a year plus time. And there are instances when it was certainly there beforehand. And from the times that we have in 2005, 2009, that were in the slideshows, the times that we have the fact that we know that the exhibit was the space was created in 1998. We know that these other times that this was the obvious place or was the place to keep these items. And so we look at that and we say we can make the logical assumption that that's where these items were. So there's sort of two bases. There's one that's saying we have a logical assumption that we made, but we also have this concrete evidence that it was within the state from 2010 to 2011, and we know that that is sufficient by itself to create a property located in California.
Okay, and the 2012 income, your position is it doesn't matter when it's recognized, using tax terms, it's when it was realized.
Right, because
Okay.
really, I mean, once the recognition doesn't matter so much because it's really where is it located, where's the location at that moment of sale? Like that's really what the law says.
Okay, thank you.
And obviously, if it was structured as a business, it would have if it had been sourced as business income, whether it was a sole proprietorship or however, then we would have had that income in the 2011 tax year more than likely, right? Because if it's a business, they could be a accrual taxpayer. So that's really just a tax timing question from 2011 to 2012. And I think what does make it confusing at first look is how do you wrap your mind around it? It's the exact same test for everything that happened in 2011. That's what drove the result.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one more question. I'll be quick here. Again, with the sourcing, there's some documentation, I think, in the record about trusts and income coming from a trust, but we're not concerned about that. Is that right? We all agree that whether it's a trust or non-resident, actually receiving the income, it's flowing through to a non-resident, or the trust is, the rules around that don't matter. I know that's complicated, but we're in -3 and just leave it at that.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that question. I appreciate
Okay.
it. I think it's two parts. One is, yes, we do view it the same as a non-resident. We're not suggesting that there's a resident trust under these circumstances. We're saying it's non-resident. I think one of the things that's a little complicated is that we do have Mr. DeSalvo's letter from 2014 that talks about $2 million of income from trust that appears to have not fully been reported on that return. So there's sort of a question mark, but ultimately every question comes back to I think what you're asking, which is what is the sourcing test? And the sourcing is, where was that income earned essentially, or what test do we use? And the test that we use is 17951-3, which is that location test, regardless of whether it's a trust or whether it's an individual.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taranchik, we are ready for your closing presentation. So you have 10 minutes, and you may begin when ready.
Thank you, Judge Long. I will take the 10 minutes. We also have a little bit of testimonial time. I'm going to let Mr. Fisher make a closing statement as well for the panel once I've completed sort of my thoughts here. I'm going to start with residency first, just because that's where FTB just finished off, and that's also sort of where their argument hasn't changed much from their briefing. I mean, I could have pretty much picked up their brief and dropped it into Mr. Hofstadt's statement there and not had to shift very much. So I'm not sure they actually listened to all of the testimony that came out about Mr. Fisher's intent, Mr. Fisher's actions, those that are around them who witnessed this move and this shift for Todd into Las Vegas. But to address sort of the FTB's primary points here, first focusing on domicile, they point to sort of three major areas here. One, which they do seem to have conceded based on the declaration of Mr. DeSalvo, was the error on the 2012 return that you've noted that indicated he was in fact domiciled in California. That was an error. It was, I'll call it a scrivener's error for lack of a better description. It was something that Mr. DeSalvo's office got wrong, and they've acknowledged they got wrong. The other issue, which is obviously a big sticking point for appellant in this case, and we acknowledge it, is the physical presence in California in 2011. 2010, we have a lot of debate on, obviously it's got no relevance here specifically because it's not at issue, but there's also some real issues in terms of the allocation of time to California based on Todd's time at the ranch versus Todd's time in Mammoth on vacation or visiting Carrie in LA. None of that has to do with where he lives. That has to do with where he's going on vacation. But for 2011, we have obviously conceded in this case that Todd did have a significant physical presence, but only because of the auction. And we call that auction the temporary transitory purpose that he was in the state of California. The other thing they point to is the maintenance of the farm in Creston. I think you've heard a lot of testimony as to where that farm fell in terms of Todd's desire to be in a specific location, but also the fact that Creston was a functioning farm, and it was a space where his mother specifically wanted maintained in the family so that the remaining memorabilia in the family could be moved up there. So Creston is its own issue. It was not his familial abode. Once he met Catherine and moved to Las Vegas, he was absolutely done with Creston in terms of his life, his home, where he wanted to be permanently. The third issue they point to in terms of domicile was the registration of Ain't Down Productions, which was his mother's touring company. And as Todd had stated previously in declaration, he wasn't even aware that his name was on Ain't Down Production until she died in 2016. So to use that as some kind of hammer or evidence that Todd's intent was to remain in California is simply incorrect. Vis-a-vis the residents, I'll call them the Bragg factors just for ease of reference. I recognize they've been split up in later cases and they've been more categorized, but they still are at their core the same and admittedly outdated. I think even Mr. Hofstall acknowledged that many of the factors that go into the Bragg analysis are now outdated. Again, physical presence in California, we've discussed that. The comparison of the properties between California and Nevada, they seem to be saying that because Creston was the ranch, Creston was a beautiful ranch, and because Todd was bouncing from Catherine's home to a rental home to ultimately their permanent abode, somehow lessens the intent and the act of moving to Las Vegas. Would they take the same position if someone came into California and simply rented a property? Does that not mean that they physically moved into the state just because it's a rental and not a purchase? I'm quite sure the FTB would not take that position. So this idea of comparing property, you've heard the discussion about the reasons for the move. You've heard the discussion, rather than renting that house in the middle between Kat's house and the purchase, they could have simply moved back to Creston and moved Kat's stuff back to Creston if they truly intended to be in California. The rental actually establishes significant points in our favor because it identifies and establishes they wanted to be in Las Vegas. And they went through some very difficult hoops to make that happen. There's been a lot of discussion on Catherine's blog on that front and vis-a-vis the farm in Creston. I think she's explained it very well. I think it's important to hear her testimony, see her say it, and understand where she was coming from as an inspirational writer. It was also clear from the testimony around Todd and Catherine that they had no intention of moving to that house in Creston. It was just not a viable possibility for the two of them, given where their life was at that moment. The next category pointed to by the FTB are the personal professional connections maintained to California. This predominantly focused on the notion, the incorrect notion, that Debbie somehow did not live in Vegas when she was at home, which we admit was not particularly frequent because she was on the road. But when she came home during these years in issue, she came home to Vegas. Bright Lights, Life with Carrie, that was 2 to 3 years after these years in issue. And it was when Debbie was slowing down, she was getting sick, she was no longer on the road as much, and she was desperately trying to spend more time with a daughter that she had been estranged from for a large portion of her life. So I think we're mixing apples and oranges in some ways by taking bright lights as evidence of where Debbie was during the 2011-2012 timeframe. They also point to the registrations and licenses, and again, we've addressed all of this previously. The museum was a California nonprofit that was formed in the 1970s in California. When the bankruptcy was filed in 2009, HMPM was still a California nonprofit, and Todd was a resident of California in 2009. We have admitted that. So the filing of the bankruptcy is not evidence in Todd's intent to stay in California in 2010 moving forward. Todd had to come back once the bankruptcy was filed. Todd was forced to come back into the Central District of California and deal with the bankruptcy and its filings in California. Again, we've discussed this. I've said it. This issue with the driver's license, we've all waited to do things that should be done sooner. When I moved from Massachusetts to Virginia, I didn't get a driver's license for 3 years because mine hadn't expired. When I moved from Virginia to California, I didn't get a driver's license for a year and a half. So, these are not the highest priority items that can be pointed to when somebody is making these moves. The other issue is the new vehicle registration. It is true. There were vehicles registered both places. Why? Because Creston Freedom Farms was still an operating ranch. It still had vehicles on property that had to be used. The two vehicles that Todd purchased during the years in issue, we've discussed. One of them, Todd actually purchased, yes, in California because he had a relationship with the dealer, but he took that car and immediately went back to Vegas. The only car that ended up being registered in California was a car that was delivered late to Toyota. Barbara Strong, his bookkeeper at Creston, had to be the one who picked it up, and she registered in California and took it to the ranch, and it wasn't until later that Todd took that car from the ranch to Nevada. That also doesn't speak to Todd's intent to be in California in any way, shape, or form. Finally, these California SOS filings, I just mentioned HMPM, registered in 72, never changed. It was a California museum until filing for bankruptcy in 2009. Ain't Down Productions, we've also discussed. That was Debbie's touring company. Todd's name was put on it. He didn't even know until after Debbie passed away. Freedom Farms, the farm, was in fact registered in 2012 when Todd was advised by counsel that you're not there anymore. You've got to register this thing and protect it as an entity. So that's why that 2012 was filed. And interestingly, in all of the discussions about Secretary of State filings, they don't mention the 15 companies that Todd has registered in Nevada over the years. They just focus on these older, sort of the convenient aspects there. Our bottom line is Todd has established that he ceased being a California resident in 2010 and became a resident of Nevada. His life changed forever, and he moved to Nevada with zero intention to come back. Only reason for his presence in California was the auction. So let's turn to the auction and the sourcing argument. Again, it sounds to me, based on what we've heard and what I just heard from the FTB, the sourcing issue comes down to sort of a very basic question, and that is, how long do the memorabilia need to be in California to constitute its location for sale? Our position is that because bluntly, we think they're wrong. There is no evidence in the record that the primary assets of Todd's that were sold at auction came into California prior to auction for any purpose other than the auction. They were brought in 2011 for purposes of the sale in 2011. They were not brought in 2010. They were not brought in 2009. They were brought to Creston for cataloging, for photographing, and then for movement down to Beverly Hills for the auction. Because we do agree on some level, sort of what does California have to have in order to tax something? It has to have a California source. And there are a couple of points that were made here that I just want to kind of comment on very quickly. One is, well, actually, let me point to a couple of items that they said first. You've heard explanation as to when these items were brought into California. I think Mr. Fisher was fairly clear, and I think was substantiated in some part by the other witnesses, that there were certain assets, the ascot dress being the primary one for Todd, that were maintained by the family in the family's control. They did not live in Creston. And Ms. Swain spent a significant amount of time talking about saving the memorabilia, protecting the memorabilia. Just because these assets were in Vegas with the family doesn't mean they weren't being protected. You've seen testimony, you've seen declarations. When Debbie took the subway dress out of her home, she always had white gloves on. Always. That dress was never touched in Vegas without those white gloves. So to say that these assets, and by the way, the subway dress, let's remember, Ms. Swain said a backpack. The way that subway dress was stored, initially it was hung, and they realized that was doing some drag and some damage on the dress. And ultimately it was boxed in this fancy acid, whatever the description is, paper, so that it was being correctly preserved. The same was true with the Ascot dress. So for them to say, I think without support in the record, that these items were moved into California earlier than purposes of the auction, I think is just incorrect. And I think the use of Antiques Roadshow kind of sums up where this misunderstanding is. Antiques Roadshow, as Todd testified to, was a show where they reached out to Todd and said, hey, we want to highlight this collection. Can we see this? Can we see this? Todd physically brought with him from Vegas to Creston the subway dress and the ruby slippers. And they were presented, as you saw on the show, as if they were there. But they were not, in fact, there. Todd physically brought those with him, just as he physically brought the subway dress to Japan. That's why we included that picture in our presentation. They did not live at Creston. They were brought to these locations for purposes of these presentations. And another thing I find interesting here is that Ms. Swain, when Mr. DeSalvo was testifying, really tried to get him to acknowledge that even without the residency issue, that this memorabilia should have been sourced to California. Even as a non-resident, the position of the FTB is it was located there for sale. What you heard Mr. DeSalvo very clearly say is he did not believe that the movement of the memorabilia to California for sale was sufficient to render it California source income. That is why, even though Todd was a non-resident, he still looked at the sourcing issue. It's been noted on the tax returns. He still allocated income, California source income. He understands the rules. But when pressed by Ms. Swain, he pressed back and said, it's not California source because it was only there for sale. And that testimony sums up our position on sourcing. The memorabilia was in California for the sole temporary, transitory purpose of sale. And that means it cannot be considered California source income. And we've made this argument in briefing. There is a temporal element to this. If FTB's position is that the location in California for one day is sufficient, you have just blown up the California auction industry. And that cannot be the intended result of that Reg-3. So our position remains, we have established that memorabilia didn't come into California but for purposes of this sale, and therefore is only here for a temporary transitory purpose and should not be considered California source income. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd for any closing brief remarks.
Well, this is my first time in a hearing like this. I have read many things that the Franchise Tax Board has written, but hearing it like this would make me think that I'm still a California resident by their standards. Everything I've heard, you could make a good argument that I am now still a California resident. The absurdity of what I listened to over there is not only old news, but it's crystal clear that they have deaf ears when it comes to live testimony from real people about real things. It also was crystal clear to me yesterday when I was shown the calendar that is in question, that the calendar is not only incorrect, but it was altered and not the calendar that I generated. So I would have to contest the calendar. I certainly would contest the calculations that were made by the FTB. I reviewed these. First time I saw that calendar was yesterday. I know the FTB also generated its own calendar, but I would contest at this point both calendars and say that they're not correct. The days that David DeSalvo chose to put on the tax returns were based on discussions, as I said, with him, and we believe those dates to be somewhat accurate at that time. Later in review, we did make a more detailed calendar, but what I'm seeing attached here with and these huge numbers of 150 days in 2011, I believe it was, whatever, I can't recall exactly the day he said. I would contest it heavily at this point. Clearly our intent, going back to the, let's just say the mission of my mother, going back 50 years, was to build a Hollywood museum. The collection, for the most part, had been moved, big chunks of it, to Tennessee, and didn't come back here until it was called back for this auction. And I was with Kat. The collection was still there. In 2010, when probably by May, we're maybe in Tennessee in May of 10. That collection is still sitting in Tennessee. It began to move back after that, after the bankruptcy court date. So you'd have to look at the bankruptcy court date to determine, let's just say, the call to gather the collection back to the ranch for the purpose of preparing for an auction. So whatever, I don't know that date off the top of my head, but that date was the date where we're like, okay, everything needs to be moved here for these purposes. That is not the time frame that's being discussed over here. I mean, they're way outside these dates. I mean, the notion that we're saying that this collection was all at the ranch, or what was the purpose of the ranch? Well, I have to tell you the purpose. There's no way to prove a purpose of why you built a building. I told it in my testimony. The purpose of the ranch warehouse was to store the museum, HMPM, Hollywood Motion Picture and Television Museum's assets. They were going to lease the space from me. We would also additionally store things there that we didn't want to handle ourselves personally. So there at different times was a mixture of things. My mother had retained, as I've testified earlier, very close control of the higher value assets. I also heard brought up a moment ago a question of insurance. Well, to put things in perspective, Steve Fetterman worked for a company called Artfacts. We only carried a $2 million policy on this entire collection. So there seems to be some discussion about what was this thing worth and what did we think it was worth. Yes, sir.
We need to wrap up.
I hear you. Well, I mean, but I mean, is it okay just to,
Well,
you tell me.
respectfully,
Yes, please.
we heard from you for 90 minutes yesterday.
I understand.
We've heard several hours of
But
witness
those
testimony.
are new facts, right?
Well,
To me, they were new.
I do feel like FTB raised some new items here that he's entitled to respond to.
I understand. We were allotted 10 minutes for the closing period. The issues addressed by Franchise Tax Board were addressed at length in the briefing, as you pointed out. We have
Sure.
I'm going to give you 2 more minutes,
Okay.
and then we're going to close this
Don't we
hearing.
have a little light that can go on? Well, in closing, I'm just suggesting that the Franchise Tax Board has no way of knowing the intent of why we do the things we do. I barely knew why my mother did the things she did. It took me decades to understand what she was up to. The collection was stored the way it was stored at her behest. The building was built at her behest. A lot of the things that happened were done at her behest. My life changed when my wife died. We've discussed that at great lengths. I don't know how much more pointed we can be about the fact that the ranch was done. It was over. Everybody knows it except these people because it suits them to have a different point of view. So my point I made notes here. I won't do them all to you, but I do think it was absurd to bring up this valuation issue. I have contested since the early days the collection was worth $30 million. When we filed for the bankruptcy court, they wanted more official. That was my opinion. At the sale, when the bankruptcy was filed, a $10 million valuation was played based on best estimate at that time. We had $2 million in insurance. I don't know how any of that means really anything. It sold for $30 million in the end, as I predicted. So the valuation is one thing, but this stuff did not come back. A lot of this stuff was not in California. It just barely made it in time to get prepared for the auction. So the idea that somehow it was all there just because the museum had a nice building, it's true it did. But we had a nice building in Tennessee too, that for storage purposes. So it's kind of a moot point in my point of view. I think the last thing I would say is, what is the outcome of all of this for me? Why am I not living at the ranch right now? If you believe everything that they're saying my intent was everything they've just said. I'm not going to say it all again. if my intent was to be in California and that was what I want to do, guess where I'd be? In California. I'm not the kind of person, as you probably have learned by now, to get shifted around real easily. A woman can do it. But I also happen to be a lover of Las Vegas. So where I live now and how I live now and the journey that it took to get to where I am now is very relevant, since they like to talk about Debbie's relationship with Carrie and that part of the journey, even though it's way after the tax period. I just say where I live now and what I do now hasn't changed since 2010 in January, not 1 inch.
Thank you. And then before we do close the hearing today, yesterday there was a discussion about the cataloging of the location of each of the items and submitting that as a document after the hearing. And my understanding was that the parties were going to meet and discuss how that should be done, if it is going to be done. Was something worked out?
I think we discussed it, and I think that the concern is that there's not necessarily evidence in the record on each specific lot item. And I think what our thought was that perhaps if this became an issue, in other words, if we really had to drill down into the sourcing piece of this, that we could simply do a statement, supplement the record with a statement. No more testimony, no more putting people on the stand. Just reopen the record to introduce a log, basically, to show what our position is vis-a-vis each specific item.
Okay. Would 30 days be enough time to
Absolutely,
prepare that?
absolutely.
Okay, so I am going to ask for that. Today is the 16th, which means that it would be due by November 15th. We're going to hold the record open until November 15th to receive. Actually, we're going to hold it beyond that. We're going to hold the record open. This document will be due on November 15th. FTB will be given an additional 30 days to respond to the catalog information, or catalog of information, I suppose. And otherwise, today's hearing is coming to a close. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in today. Mr. Fisher, all of the witnesses, Ms. Hickland, thank you for telling your story. The judges, the panel will meet and decide your case later, and we will send a written opinion of the decision within 100 days of the record being closed. Today's hearing in the appeal of Fisher and Hickland is now adjourned, and this concludes today's hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.